Good evening. I really wanted to do the Good Evening Vietnam, but I decided I wouldn't, but now I have. Anyways, welcome back to the public hearing. I'll call it back to order in a moment. I just wanted to quickly go through the procedures for anybody that hadn't been watching already, and I'll give an abbreviated overview. So once I've called the meeting back to order, I'll then invite members of the public to speak, and I've been provided with a list of speakers for this evening. And I'll ask that all speakers maintain a respectful approach to sharing their perspective with council. I'll ask each speaker to tell council their name and whether or not they are residents of Canmore or have a home and business here. I remind those that are speaking that there's 10 minutes available. Don't feel obliged to take that 10 minutes. There's others waiting, but you have 10 minutes and administration will pop in about at the 9-minute mark, which will give you 1 minute to conclude your comments. There may be questions from members of council for the speakers, and we may take a short break every hour or so, just everybody needs to stretch their legs a bit. And at the end of the evening, I'll call a recess of the public hearing until 9 a.m. Monday morning. With that, if everybody's in the room and ready to go, I'll ask John Jorgensen to lead us off.
Okay, how is that? Did everybody hear me?
Yeah, you bet. You're coming in loud and clear.
Okay, great. Yes, I'm John Jorgensen. I'm a Bragg Creek resident. I have read the ASPs, but I have a kind of a unique opportunity here to provide some important content and input to these two area structure plans. Because in my past career, since the mid-1990s to my retirement in 2015, I was a regional wildlife biologist for the provincial government, working out of the Canmore office. And during that time, I was heavily involved in all things related to wildlife management issues. And of course, the wildlife corridor issue and Three Sisters development was a prime issue, and it was a major focus of many of the things that I had to deal with. And this all kind of followed the NRCB hearing in 1992. And during all those years, I worked quite closely with senior level government managers, with the various developers, who owned the Three Sisters property at various times. I worked with the town of Canmore, town planners, quite heavily in providing input from a wildlife perspective and providing input from the government perspective anyways, and also with the community in an effort to try to achieve some kind of a balance between the needs of wildlife and the development pressures and approvals that were granted to private landowners throughout the Bow Valley. It wasn't an easy task. At times, it was a pretty depressing task. There was constant new developments coming onto the table. And with every new development came new loss of more wildlife habitat. It came with an increase in human population, which inevitably impacted the remaining undeveloped areas, as there wasn't, basically the Bow Valley is a pretty narrow, confined piece of land. There's only so much land to go around, and we're trying to provide opportunities and habitat and movement patterns for wildlife, but at the same time, we've got an ever-growing population in the Bow Valley looking for places to go and recreate. And at some point, the only places that they have to recreate end up being in important wildlife habitat areas or in the wildlife corridors. And then we had also long-standing issues with human-wildlife conflicts. And a lot of effort was put into trying to mitigate these human-wildlife conflicts through the WildSmart program, just through management actions, through various attractive management programs. But it really highlighted the whole issue around human-wildlife conflicts and the need to try to deal with these so that we weren't removing individual animals. Primarily, it ended up being bears, both black bears and grizzly bears that would have to be removed from the Bow Valley. So it was a huge challenge, but fortunately, there was tremendous support from the community, and a great amount of energy went into the establishment and the protection of wildlife corridors. It was very difficult to go anywhere, read any newspapers around Canmore without reading about wildlife corridors and, of course, development that went on. But we did make pretty great strides in the establishment of a network of wildlife corridors and habitat patches throughout the Bow Valley in Canmore, and the emphasis then became protecting these corridors, trying to enhance them as best we could to make them as functional as possible in light of the ongoing pressures that we were under. And now we have 2 area structure plans that are under consideration by the town of Canmore: Three Sisters Village Area Structure Plan and the Smith Creek one. Now these plans, if approved as proposed, have, I believe, the potential to undo a lot of the effort that has been devoted to providing some semblance of viable movement possibilities for wildlife along the south side of the valley. And I thought it would be appropriate here to share a few of my insights, identify some of my concerns, and make a few recommendations regarding these area structure plans that I would offer up to council to consider in their deliberations. Now, a little bit of background and a little bit of history. In 1998, the provincial government approved a series of across valley and along valley corridors on the south side of the Bow Valley. Now, at that time, they weren't called across valley or along valley. They had different terminologies, primary and secondaries, but I'm not going to get into all of that because it's just going to confuse the whole issue here. But regardless, one of the main corridors that we're looking at here relates to the Along Valley corridor that runs along the entire south side of the valley and along all of the south side of the Three Sisters development. I'm back in 1998 when this initial approval was granted, and this was done as a requirement of the NRCB decision report that required the government to approve a series of wildlife corridors. But back in 1998, we had very little information to go on. There was virtually no science available with which to try to decide corridor design. There was a little bit of direction that we got from the NRCB decision, but it was pretty basic information, mostly related to minimum corridor width. The corridors should be in as undisturbed a state as possible, and that they ideally follow known movement routes. But back then, we didn't really have any other information to go on. Now, at that time when these approvals were going on, there's an understanding that the corridor along the south side of the valley in the vicinity of the Three Sisters Village Area Structure Plan, that a lot of that land was heavily undermined, and that there was going to be a golf course development of some kind in some form that was going to occur on those lands. But it was not until it was just after the 1998 approval was granted that the BC Ag had developed a set of guidelines that had basis in science from work that was done around Banff. And this was a document that became available. Unfortunately, it wasn't available until after the government had already given an approval to the 98 corridors. But what this document did was allow us to assess the existing corridor and look at issues and problems associated with this corridor. But I also have to indicate that at the time, the provincial government made the decision that the BCA corridor guidelines would not be applicable to Three Sisters lands.
Excuse me, Mr. Jorgensen, I'm just giving you
Yes.
your 9-minute time check.
Holy smokes, really? All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
unfortunately, just a minute left, sir.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm going to go directly to a couple of slides. If I can share my screen.
Okay.
Okay.
You see the, oh, there we go.
There we go. Okay, what I'm using here is the 2004 ASPB, just to indicate a few highlights here. The Along Valley, the corridor, and there were some land exchanges that were undertaken in order to try to acquire some buffering to the existing corridor in order to try to improve its functionality. So there were a number of conservation easements that were implemented. But there's a pinch point that was identified here on this area east of Three Sisters Creek, which we needs to pay attention to because it's very important for the corridor function. The cabin line was something that was identified back in 2004 with this area structure plan. And it was a line that was demarcated with myself working with town planners to identify where it would be appropriate to locate low, or basically at the time they were referred to as golf cabins. And they were, in the ASPP, they're identified as appropriate for areas north of this line, but not south of the line. And a part of this, and this line was, we looked at the lay of land, we looked at habitat features, we looked at cover values, we looked at the existing clearings of the golf course in order to identify where the best location for this line would be. And it would also be protection for this pinch point area here. And this is the estimated golf course line. I've kind of estimated approximately where it would be in relation to the the current land area structure plan that we're looking at right now. And this is the area of the pinch point that I was talking about. That's important for us to protect. With this current plan and fencing, where the fencing is identified, it would basically exclude wildlife from being able to access this pinch point. So this is definitely a problem area. And if fencing becomes an option here, the fencing should not be located where it's proposed here because it will block off this important pinch point area. Yes.
Are you able to wrap this up in a few seconds? Have you shared this in written submission with?
I have, but not in the complete form that it is right now. And I apologize. The time's gone by so fast, but I have a series of recommendations related to. Could you
send the recommendations to us in written format?
I certainly can, and as well as recommendations I made for the Smith Creek area as well.
That would be wonderful if you could do that, because there are a number of people in the queue waiting to speak.
All right, my apologies for going over time.
That's okay, no problem at all. I've really appreciated listening to it. I know you've got a long history with these issues. So thanks very much for joining this evening, and please be sure to send those all of that information in written submission form.
Yes, will do.
Thank you. This time I'll ask Scott Jevons to join in.
Good afternoon, Mayor Borman and Council. Can you hear me?
Yes?
Oh, good. Okay. My name is Scott Jevons. I have been a resident of Canmore for 30 years, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. Both area structure plans present unacceptable risks and liabilities for our community, and I will focus on two concerns tonight. One is undermining. One of Jerry Stevenson's legacies was his warning to us about the undermining hazards in the Three Sisters Village area and the unsuitability of the area for development. That is why it was developed as a golf course. And I find it shocking to see a proposal for development on undermined lands. Most concerning are the challenges and liabilities in regard to the underground infrastructure that the town would eventually be responsible for. And insurance held by the developer and its engineers would almost certainly prove inadequate and irrelevant, as these parties will be long gone when most problems develop. The area around Three Sisters Village is not safe for development. My other main concern is around corridor functionality and human-wildlife conflicts, and I agree with what John Jorgensen was just presenting. Despite claims from the developer, Smith Creek corridor is in no way meets the legal requirements set by the NRCB. Instead of fixing deficiencies around the disconnect, east of the disconnect, the corridor was reduced in width by as much as 160 meters and narrows to as little as 235 meters, which is far short of the minimum standard width of 450 meters. This gets better. West of the disconnect, the area was added to the corridor, but the corridor width is as narrow as 158 meters. The consequences of not having a functional wildlife corridor will be increased human wildlife conflict, creating risks for the residents and the town. In addition, development should not be approved west of Stewart Creek until a new wildlife crossing structure is developed. And because of the fiscal challenges facing Alberta, it may be a very long time until a new underpass is built, if ever. The fencing proposal is without merit and would be another liability for the town. It offloads the expense of long-term maintenance of the fence to the town, which in time would cost millions of dollars. I ask that you carefully consider the risks and liabilities for our community and that you not approve either of these area structure plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining in this evening, Mr. Jevons. I'll look to members of council to see if they have any questions for this speaker. And seeing none, again, thank you for taking your time to consider these applications and bring your comments forward. I do appreciate that. This time I'll ask Gabe Lamarche to join in.
Hello, can you hear me yet?
You bet. Good to see you.
Perfect. Okay. Oh, thank you very much. I'm glad I got a chance to talk this evening. I'm just going to start introducing myself. My name is Gabe Lamarche, and I'm an 11-year resident of Canmore. I live with my family in Three Sisters Ridge. So we're immediately between the area that will be impacted by these two ASPs that have been brought forward. I'm not a homeowner here. My family and I have been long-term renters in this town, not necessarily through our choice, but kind of a result of the realities of our current housing market. I did take great interest in these ASPs and have been trying to, kind of wrap my head around what they would mean for the future of our town and my family. And I've read both ASPs quite thoroughly, including all of the various attached reports. A little bit furthermore, in the past couple of weeks, I took a couple or copies of a number of the post plans and maps that were included in the application and loaded them on a GPS tablet and walked the Guy Lafleur and Loki trails with my family to really understand on the ground what is being proposed with these developments. This kind of comes from my educational background. It's in physics and computer science, and specifically GIS. And for the last 15 years, I've worked as a professional in Western Canada with engineering teams that have been generally investigating and developing pipeline routes for large-scale oil and gas pipeline projects. I was directly involved in some projects that have become well known, such as Northern Gateway, Trans Mountain, Kitimat LNG. And my role in those projects is generally involved getting out on the ground, walking the route, mapping it, and then also meeting and listening with stakeholders, landowners, government agencies, other stakeholders. Certainly First Nations has become a major part of our work. And so by that nature, a lot of the information I would be collecting is maps, drawings, engineering reports. And so when it came to the ASBs, that's kind of where I probably zoomed in and focused on. And for my presentation, I'd like to be a little bit different from the others in that I'm going to share my screen now and share some of the maps and observations of the maps that have been provided with this ASP. Just don't, one moment, please. It's all right. And so this, let me just see, are you now seeing a map?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So this is a map of Three Sisters Village and as proposed, and this is kind of where I think I'd like to start. At this point with this ASB, I would be opposed to the ASB as it's written, primarily concerns related to undermining and the idea of what we'd be working on here. The report prepared by Wood and included in the ASB is actually, I thought, a very good report. They have done an impressive amount of work in building that 3D model of compiling all of the old mine records. And from that, I think they've made a pretty thorough analysis of the risk. But and here I'm going to echo some of the comments that were made earlier today by Speaker Garrett Brown. The mapping they provided, and I'm just going to put it on here quite quickly. The report prepared by Wood, what it primarily did is use that model and a bunch of field observations and a bunch of borehole investigations, and from that they have put a classification, a basically 5-level classification over the entire ASB site, dividing it into these 5 zones of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where green being no structural or ground mitigations would be anticipated. Yellow would likely require some ground mitigation, but these are for near surface workings with the potential for sinkhole formation. Zone 3 areas where development is possible with ground or structural mitigation as necessary. These are associated with areas that are undermined by more than one deep pillared beam or seam, and the potential for differential settlement due to uncertain pillars and depillared areas. I mean, this is where I think things are starting to get a bit scarier. We're talking about having multiple mines overlapping each other, settling at different rates. Zone 4, the purple or magenta, we're getting into now development possible, but higher ground strain is possible. These zones are associated with the margins above the edges of depillared areas where strain, tilt, curvature, and are expected to be locally higher. Again, not things that could be mitigated for, but that we really, I think, have to be questioning why we'd be wanting to put a building on when we know that risk exists. And then finally, zone 5, the steeply dipping or subvertical workings. These areas have potential for sinkholes or trough development. And the recommendation from Wood is that no buildings be built over any of the Zone 5 areas. Now, if we look at the map, it is the Zone 5 area. It's just primarily this one kind of fairly narrow strip, but it does cut through the ASP. And what the missing map, I thought, from the ASP was showing this model that Wood built with any of their plans or any of their proposals. So what I've done is I have done that for us to show how all of these things overlap or connect together. So this is, if we take the hazard zones, and I've just kind of digitized them again, and then now I'm just going to turn off the hazard map and look at particularly the proposal from Three Sisters Development here. And what we see, and if we look, actually maybe the land use map is a better one to zoom in on. One moment. Here we see that, not as we might have hoped or expected, that the red zone would have been completely omitted. It strikes right through the center of the hotel and spa district. And for that, I'm just going to just throw on the, sorry, one moment, kind of a highlight of those different areas. So if we look at the different areas, my notes just got mixed up. One moment.
Yeah, don't.
Each of the, we can see kind of how, or I did actually do a breakdown of kind of how much of each of those 5 categories impacts each of the land use proposed areas. So with the residential land use in this plan, 51% of the residential area is on green rated areas, the lowest risk. Another 24% is on the yellow. So a full 75% of the residential use areas are in the lowest risk areas. The indoor recreation site, again, had about a 75% of it being on green. But when we get into the actual commercial portions of this development, the village center is only 11% in the green. It's 50% in the yellow, and then another, the remaining 40% is in the higher risk categories. The innovation district has only 15% green and 20% yellow, so 30% in the lower risk areas. The remainder, almost 60% in the higher risk categories. And then the hotel and spa district, where a full third of the area shown in these plans is actually came with a recommendation from
Excuse me,
Wood.
Mr. LaMarche?
Yep.
I just
Is that
wanted
it?
to give you your 9-minute time check.
Okay, thank you. I'll just summarize then quickly. A few other couple of things then. So the one thing with building buildings is that they can be moved or sites can be chosen quite specifically for them. Also associated with these developments, of course, is all of the utilities and roads, and those become more of the town's responsibility. So let's just quickly switch instead to the servicing, the services as proposed, and see how these colors overlap those as well. So in this model, or within the proposed, they had 8.8 kilometers of water mains, a lot of them going in and out of these higher risk areas. Another 7.8 kilometers of streets, new streets, which are also, again, crossing a lot of these higher risk areas. And then another 10 kilometers of cycling trails. I mean, probably lower risk, but we know what problems even the cycling trail in Durgas Gate caused for the town when it experienced a sinkhole. So I guess what would be, maybe I'll just wrap up by saying, or showing one last thing. How could maybe we use this area better? And for that, I'm just going to show with the same risk as mapped out by Wood, how it related to the original plan as the current 2004 ASB. And what we see there is that almost the entire area proposed for development is in green or yellow, with only one little crossing of that red zone that could easily be readjusted. But all of the golf course areas, which are the higher risk, were not proposed for development. I guess I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. This has been a very interesting presentation, and I've been wondering myself what it would look like to see the map superimposed. So thank you for sharing that consideration.
Yeah, I guess sorry, I just wanted to say one final thing. I know at the beginning I said I made the effort to take the maps and go out and walk across the land. I think this is important enough that I would also extend an invitation to you, Mayor Boardman, and or any of the other councillors who are interested. I have the gadgets, I have the maps ready. If any of you would also like to do that, reach out to me, and I'd be happy to set aside the time to give you that same experience.
Thanks for that offer. And I encourage you to send these maps as part of your written submission.
I will, yes, with a few more. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. And I really appreciate you taking the time to provide such a well-considered presentation to council. And thank you for being here. At this point, I will ask John Pomeroy to join us. And I'll remind Dr. Pomeroy that there's a 10-minute speaking limit.
Okay, thank you very much. And Your Worship and council members, it's a delight to speak to you on this topic. I'm speaking to you as a resident of Canmore and a professor and academic. My comments do not reflect the position of the University of Saskatchewan. One thing I'd like to clarify for public discussion is that the University of Saskatchewan's interest in the Gateway project has no bearing upon the two projects being considered here, the Smith Creek and the Three Sisters Mountain Village. So starting just with that point of clarification.
Sure, thank you.
My comments are with respect to some of the hydrological, geotechnical, and climate aspects of this development. First, I'll start with the climate change impact of growth. There's really no way with the current application of technologies to grow a community without increasing its climate footprint. One can have more efficient homes and things like that, but transport is still a massive emitter of greenhouse gases, and land conversion, loss of trees, other things reduce the ability to uptake carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So I think it's important to know scientifically that if Canmore increases in size, increases in population, it increases its climate footprint, and that has bearing on its declaration of a climate emergency. And the other thing is that the proposal so far is not particularly innovative in any way for looking at alternative energy sources, whether it be geothermal, additional solar, micro hydro, or anything else. So things that might start to reduce the footprint in some way are simply not included there. So climate change will be contributed to by this project, and climate change will also impact the project in various ways. So under the business as usual scenarios, which is the one that we're on for this century, by the end of the century, temperatures will be 4 to 5 to as high as 7 degrees higher in this region, with the greatest increases in temperature in winter and in evenings. But precipitation will also be more intense, about 25% greater precipitation on average. But the concern, and this is from our high resolution model runs done at 4-kilometer resolution over the Bow Valley, which is an unprecedentedly high resolution for looking at future climate. And for that, our models are showing a fourfold increase in the intensity of extreme precipitation events over this region, over the Bow Valley. That's that's quite disturbing. If you were to look at a fourfold increase to the inputs of the flood that caused the Cougar Creek flood in 2013, we would have been in much more serious situation than we were with what we had. Now, I've gone through the technical documents over the steep creek hazards of the project, and of course they're focusing on Smith Creek and the Three Sisters Creek and some other small creeks, Marsh, and a few others through there. They do consider climate change, but Smith Creek involves a 50% increase, a 1.5-fold increase in extreme events, and Three Sisters 2 times increase, not the 4 that we're looking at. Further, though, our modeling has shown that the co-occurrence of wildfire and climate change increases risk even more. And so wildfire and destruction of soils associated with that will double stream flow in the small streams and creeks around Canmore. And so if you take that, now we're looking at an 8-fold increase in extreme flows and precipitation inputs to them by the end of the century, should we have climate change and wildfire. And that is not an unlikely scenario to be looking at in the future. So I think that we have to be much more conservative with respect to the Steep Creek mitigation hazards looking forward into the century. And some of the very 1 in 3,000 events have to be considered much more likely than they were in that plan. And the acceptable risks for some of the developments around the edges and the roadways through here that would access have to be looked at very carefully, so the Three Sisters Parkway in particular doesn't get washed out, or Cairns Landing and areas like that downstream. The Smith Creek areas appear to have more serious problems. So those are ones that I think should be revisited using some of the technology, in fact, developed in the Bow Valley. And they're using the climate change scenarios from Prine. One of the co-authors on that was Martin Clark, who helped write that paper several years ago. But I think he would agree that the more modern and more localized results should be used for town design. Finally, I'll simply say that as a citizen, the livability, the sustainability, and the vision for Canmore I don't think is reflected by a large increase in its population, and it's spread out over an area such as envisioned along the Three Sisters Parkway and past it. The community itself needs to walk the walk of sustainability and mitigating climate change. It can do that by developing a sustainable future for itself. And that itself makes it an incredibly attractive place to be, to base, to travel through, simply to see. And the heart of this community could easily be lost by this expansion. So many speakers have expressed this more eloquently than I possibly could, but it's something that I wholeheartedly agree with. So thank you so much for listening to my comments.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pomeroy, for joining us this evening. And we all know you and your work quite well. So of course you come with good credibility. So I appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening to share those thoughts. And your co-worker, Dr. Short, had spoken as well earlier in the public hearing. So again, thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
And I'll now ask Allison Penny to join in.
Allison has not yet joined, and our next
Okay.
speaker also had to step out really quick. We have one speaker lined up currently, just waiting for the others to come in. Mark Unbrew.
Okay. Is he on the list anywhere here?
He is. He's in the 6 to 7 list. Yeah.
Okay. Mark, if you'd like to join in. If Mark is listening, Mark Unrow? Mark? Maybe we'll move on.
We currently have no other speakers in the waiting room or in the meeting. I guess it's a slow evening to start. Break time.
Okay, so Dr. Eels, it was on my list, but she's not in the room yet. Is that
She's
right?
had to step out really quick. She'll be back as soon as she can.
So you're suggesting we take a break until 6 at this point?
Perhaps a 5-minute break and just allow a few people to join.
Okay, all right, we'll do that then. Yeah, we'll come back, well, in 5 minutes, just after 1:45.
Mayor Borman.
Yes,
Just letting you know, Councillor Comfort's having some technical difficulties.
okay. Well, I'm ready to going again. I'll give the other councillors a second or two. Okay, well, let's get started again because there are a lot of speakers. I understand that next to join us will be Martin Armitage.
Hi, can you hear and see me?
Yes, indeed.
Hi, thank you, Mayor and councillors, for allowing me to present today. My name is Martin Armitage, and I have been a property owner since 2002 and live in the Homesteads area. I'm speaking today to express my concern about Three Sisters Mountain Village development proposal and the two ASPs. Yes, I have looked at both the ASPs for Three Sisters Village and Smith Creek. Most of my focus has been on the Three Sisters Village ASP with concerns for the undermining, but I'm also concerned about the wildlife corridor in both ASPs. A bit about my background. I'm a retired geologist, geophysicist that worked in the Canadian oil industry in Calgary for 31 years. And with a long career in the Canadian oil industry, I have experience working across BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and a short term in the Northwest Territories and Beaufort Sea. During the last 5 years of my career, I was fortunate to be involved with mentoring young geologists, geophysicists, and engineers in the early part of their career. Part of that mentoring involved leading field trips to look at the rocks as a learning tool for what we explored underground, and several of these field trips had stops in Canmore. Specifically, the one location was to look at the highly deformed rock at the T intersection of Three Sisters Drive and Highway 742. This complex outcrop with faults, folded, highly fractured, and overturned strata was a very effective tool for teaching young professionals how complex the geology can be in the Front Ranges of the Canadian Rockies. This outcrop was also the location Jerry Stevenson ran his Canmore Museum mine tours, and Ben Gadd has produced work you can download from the internet. I'd like to actually share my screen now and just show you one of the photos that Ben Gadd had. So let's just see. Can you guys see that?
Not quite yet.
Well, it's a photo of the outcrop at the intersection of Three Sisters Drive and Highway 742. Plus, some of you on council may have been driving by, seeing one of Jerry's tours, or the company I work for, with several people holding clipboards, cameras, rock hammers, and madly drawing the structures they were observing. The point of telling you this is that I have a knowledge base regarding the geology in Western Canada, and specifically the Canmore area, and hence the area where Three Sisters Mountain Village ASPs are proposed. I'm familiar with the collapse at Deergas Gate in 2010, as well as the Three Sisters Drive collapse in 2004. This collapse on Three Sisters Drive was apparently mitigated. However, it is clear that the word mitigated does not mean safe from collapse. I have viewed the presentations of the proposal to use fly ash as a substitute to make a paste to mitigate some of the mined areas. And I actually spoke with a couple of engineers that told me that fly ash cement is a cheap product that I suspect none of us would want our homes or town infrastructure built over top of mines mitigated with this product. Living in Canmore for years, I crossed Three Sisters Drive at Carey intersection and hike or mountain bike in the forest between the Nordic Center, the Highline Trail, Lawrence Grassy Development, and Three Sisters Drive. And over the years, I've noticed several collapses from underground mining in this area. Some are fenced off, while others are not. And this area has been mined less than the area proposed for development by Three Sisters Mountain Village. With this knowledge and observations, I cannot support the proposed ASPs by Three Sisters Mountain Village or know how the town of Canmore can consider approval, knowing the risk of accepting enormous liability for taxpayers and property owners in Canmore. No building or infrastructure such as roads, sewers, or pipelines should be permitted over the abandoned golf course due to the large amount of undermining in this area. I'm also not in favor of reducing the wildlife corridors in both ASPs, as we already have too much conflict with animals in the Bow Valley, and they need space to live and room to move as well. So please vote no to the Area Structure Plan Bylaws 2021, 05 and 06 proposed by Three Sisters Mountain Village. Thank you for listening to me, and is there any questions?
I'm looking to the rest of council for questions. And I don't see any, but really appreciate you taking the time this evening and preparing such an informed presentation for council. I really do appreciate that. Thank you for
Okay.
joining in this evening.
Thank you for your time.
At this time, I'll ask Chrissy Nickerson-Keck to join in.
Thank you, John. I'll only take a minute of your time. I just thought I'd give you my 2 cents.
You bet.
Okay, I prepared a little 50-second thing. Scale back, stop the Three Sisters Mountain Village development, please. My name is Chrissy Nickerson, longtime Bow Valley resident and homeowner. I am raising my family here as well as working as a full-time artist. I have a Bachelor of Design, major in environmental planning degree, the only undergraduate program of its type in Canada from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, affiliated with the Master's Program of Urban and Rural Planning at Dalhousie in Halifax. I was taught that science has its place in nature, but an artistic, interpretive approach is superior in translation when it comes to concept design of sensitive areas in regards to planning urban and rural communities. It is not hard to conclude that this wildlife in question needs to be maintained. Planet Earth and all people benefit from green space, not only in recreational opportunities and tourism, health and pride of Canada, but also for our healthy future. We must not allow urban sprawl to dominate our valley for short-term gain of a few jobs and wealth that will mostly go to outside developers, perhaps. We need to plan for preservation of green spaces now, please. Healthy watersheds, proper riparian zones of those 5 creeks that run through there. Plan for public access within the junction of our 3 valleys that are so important to the continuity of natural habitat throughout the Rocky Mountains from the Yellowstone to Yukon. I'm against further development within the Wind Tower Valley in regards to the Three Sisters Mountain Village all the way through to the envisioned Smith Creek development. I think it should be revised greatly, scaled back, or stopped. I think these lands should be preserved. We need more green space, more natural space on planet Earth as a whole. And if you really think about the amount of green space from this town to the foothills along the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains as a whole, it's really not a lot of space for planet Earth to maintain as a green space. I just added that. John, Mayor, and councillors, I think we really need to plan for sustainability as a community during a time that our planet needs us more than ever to be brave. We need to make difficult decisions to restrict further gratuitous development in our prized forests and natural habitats. So thanks for giving me that time.
Thank you, Chrissy, for joining in. Any questions from members of council for Ms. Nickerson? See none. Really, thanks so much for taking the time. I know it's not easy to fit some of these things in, and we do appreciate you joining in and sharing your perspective.
You too.
At this time, I'll ask Darcy Lynn MacArthur to join in.
Hello,
Hello.
I'll just get my screen sharing here. I'm glad I came in early.
So am I.
Yeah. Hopefully this is going to work. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Mr. Mayor, Council, people listening out online. I'd just like to thank you for listening, for absorbing and strategically thinking about the information from our community. I am, as I'm sure you are, in awe of the expertise, talent, and insight that exists in our community. It's quite amazing and really wonderful. My name is Darcy Lynn MacArthur, and I have lived in Canmore for 8 years now. Prior to that, for about 12 years, I was a part-time resident until I got old enough to retire and move here full-time. I'd like you to know that I am opposed to both of the ASPs and would just like to share my thoughts around that with you. So as I was looking at the actually overwhelming amount of information, I tried to sort of break it down into what I think was just some critical things for me. And I think critical thinking is required for me in 3 key areas. One is timing, size, and safety. And for me, I think that nature needs time to heal this land, and it will be nature that heals it effectively, and that will be over the course of 50, 100, 150 years. I think also that we as a community first need to deal with other pressing issues, and I'll talk about those a little bit later. But I think there's a real sequencing to any time that there's sort of transformational or massive development that's going to go on in any community. And the other point that came to mind for me was that the intent to develop does not, to me, mean that you have to develop. And I read with some surprise and I guess a bit of concern on both the town website as well as information provided by Three Sisters Mountain Village that not developing this land was not an option. And to me, that felt like it was a prejudgment about a decision had already been made. And so I just want to share with you a little bit of a goofy analogy, but it's kind of dinner time, so it might work. That if I had intent to have a salad for dinner and I went to the store and bought some romaine lettuce, and on the way home, I heard a news report that there was maybe salmonella or some other hazard on that lettuce, my intent to have that salad for dinner would change. And I think that as we gather more information, as many of the speakers have acknowledged that there's new and emerging and just different information, that we don't have to feel that our hands are tied or we're handcuffed to an original intent that was made before new information came to light. My next point is around size. And I feel that some days our community is almost at overcapacity. And I know that many of my friends have said, and I've experienced this as well, that particularly on weekends, we don't go downtown, we don't go to restaurants, we have a hard time finding space in the sort of adjoining wilderness to enjoy our community. And it feels to me over-tourism is not going away. I mean, we live in a really, really special place. And I would think that the majority of people in Canmore welcome tourists. We welcome people to come and live in our community, but we're just at that capacity where it feels sort of overrun. And so for me, that in relation to this ASP and the magnitude of it, is it feels like right now we need recreation space, we need space for animals, and we likely need some more commercial support to service all of the people. And that to me is back to my first point of first dealing with other pressing issues. Like there's a sequencing that if we have some other things in place first, then it's easier to talk about transformational change.
For the company I work for, with several people holding clipboards, cameras.
Hold on, who's there?
Sorry.
Don't know who that was.
I don't know either. So
Somebody turned their mic on inadvertently, I think. Sorry, go on, Darshilin.
And so my third bullet here around critical things is certainly people with but I was trying to do homework and preparing.
Unfortunately, you're breaking up a little bit now.
Oh, sorry.
There, that's better.
Okay. One of the things that struck me was listening to Jerry, who said that, can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Is
Well, we
that, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
I don't know
no,
what to-
keep trying. Your connection seems to be breaking up.
Okay. One of the things that he noted was that he had done a 10-year investigation to assess the land, and he had done that with a former president of Three Sisters Mountain Village. And they assessed the high, medium, low risk, and the low hazard land and golf course land identified as medium and high hazard. And I think the other thing that I discovered in that was that he had noted that lots of information available that has been used by Three Sisters, that one of the critical pieces that isn't available in the mine plan information is the rate of extraction. So they don't know if it was 20% or 80% or somewhere. So for me, sort of some key things that jumped out at me. I thought about, council at other meetings that I've been to have said, and I think it's needed in this time as well, and get from experts. And so in my mind, for me, Jerry, Ray, I trust their.
Yeah, we're losing you quite badly now.
I can break that on.
Perhaps you could. Somebody's taking her bandwidth, I guess.
Sorry, I'm just getting people to shut down some other devices that were going on.
There you go. That'll make a big difference, I think.
Yeah, sorry. So I don't think they expected me to be on so soon. So they were still having some
Sure.
chat. Yeah.
No problem at all.
Sorry. So the other thing that happened for me is, I was really trying to learn about this and be informed. So I took the information that was available through the town website, through Three Sisters, through the information that Bow Valley Engage had provided. And I talked with my Uncle Bill about it. And he reviewed it in depth, and we had good conversations. And you might say, well, who's Uncle Bill? Well, my Uncle Bill is a PhD geology and PhD in earth sciences. And he's been in countless mines around the world, but he's also been in Canmore Mine and knows the geology. And when he looked at all the information, he concurred with Jerry and Ray. So I was just trying to do my homework, and I thought I'd share with you that piece. I also was thinking, and I'm looking at this from a macro perspective, that the size of this proposal, that one council and one developer should not somehow alone be able to define the future of Canmore. That, as we all know, and I think feel and is expressed through these public hearings, and I think council agrees with this, is Canmore is owned by the community. So that the ASPs often are a task that needs to be undertaken, and they're important tasks. But somehow for the magnitude of this one, it feels that they are actually a complete transformation of Canmore. And so they are, in essence, defining who we will become. And I think that's why we have the degree of engagement right now from our community.
Excuse me, Ms. MacArthur, I'm just giving you your 9-minute time check.
Thanks very much. I also thought, that Three Sisters chose to buy this land. It's their business decision. It's their risk of doing business. And we don't have to make the decision work. As much as I like businesses to be successful and make money, because it's vital to our community. I also thought about council accountability and their duty. And so I think you would agree with me on these 3 points. You have the power and the authority through the Municipal Government Act to develop and maintain safe and viable communities. And within that act, it also specifically requires you to, when making a bylaw, to respect the safety, health, and welfare of people and the protection of people and property. With respect to your accountability and duty in governance, I know that you were elected to govern the administration of Canmore, and I'm not talking about the staff necessarily, but Canmore. And with all due respect to your expertise, your passion, your experience, I don't believe that at the time of the election that there was a mandate for the magnitude of this transformational change. So in your accountability and duty, I think to represent our community, to listen and learn from our community, and with that in mind, I'm asking you to hit the pause button, to have the courage to say no to both the ASPs, to give people a place to be and to play, and to give wildlife a place to roam, and to really help protect our future. So thank you very much. I'm sorry for my variable internet there.
That's okay. We all suffer from that occasionally. And just so you and others know, Ms. Dinaj, who's timing the speakers, is pausing the timer if there's technical difficulties. So you still had your full 10 minutes.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for joining in this evening. We appreciate your sharing your perspective with council. Councillor Sanford, you have a question?
I do, Mayor Barman. Thank you for asking. I have a question for Arthur. When you mentioned that this was too big of a decision for council to make on ASP that would affect our future, we have a number of ASP that are currently in process that were made by previous council. So the whole process is a long-term investment in time by previous councils to this council. And, you know, are you aware that there are 3 major ASPs currently operating in Canmore?
Oh, of course. But, you know, for me, and I think that indication of this, of the magnitude of this one, you know, we're moving from being a town to being almost a city. And so I think that's, you know, part of when you look at this on a macro level and take it away from being a task, it's just really important to step back and say, these are transformational ones, and that while there's other ones that have shaped significantly our community, I don't think in my experience or my knowledge, which it could be inaccurate, that there's one that's been of such magnitude with such controversy over such a widespread area. So that for me is why I think to rest this on just your shoulders and just the developer's shoulders, I think we see the need to have the community engaged in what does it really look like and what are our concerns, which we're doing right now. But we don't see this kind of response to other ASPs that come across council. You know, we have a few people show up and make submissions, but not on this magnitude. And I think it reflects the magnitude of this ASP, and it is changing Canmore fundamentally. So that's why I think it's different.
We can also see that ASPs take a long time. So we're living the long time of other ASPs. Just
absolutely. Absolutely. But it feels this one is premature with everything to be moving forward on.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks very much. Once again, thank you very much for joining us, Ms. MacArthur. And yes, it's been...
Appreciate your time. Good luck.
Thank you. I'll ask now Mr. Bart Robinson to join in. Bart?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. So, Your Worship, members of council, thank you for your attention. And a special thank you to the town clerk and other staff who are working so diligently to make this run smoothly. A 5-day public hearing, I understand it's now heading into a 6th day, is definitely a high pressure, don't screw it up production, and I really appreciate their efforts. I'd also like to thank all of the Canmorites who have presented and have yet to present. They remind me once again of what a diverse, talented, and passionate group of people call this valley their home. Many years ago, one of my political science professors taught me the truism that democracies are run by those who show up. And I'm inspired and encouraged by just how many of my fellow citizens are showing up and engaging with this most consequential question. So I've been a Bow Valley resident for 52 years, and I'm grateful beyond words to have lived a full and privileged life on the traditional lands of the Treaty 7 First Nations. I oppose the bylaws as proposed for multiple reasons, but will focus here on just one, which is that the proposed development is misaligned with the future that the world needs. Toward the end of the first reading, Mr. Ohlenberger stated that the numbers of previous ASPs no longer apply because the times, the paradigm have changed. I agree with him to the degree that the way we think about economics, politics, society, and the environment have changed dramatically over the last few decades. But that said, I believe the lesson to be learned from those changes is that any development on our valley's remaining developable lands should be small, carefully considered in a cumulative impacts context, and approached with a sense of restraint, respect, and even reverence for the valley's natural systems, which are far and away its greatest asset. So alarmed scientists and scholars are now coming out of the closet to speak openly about the ghastly future that awaits the generations to come if we don't make transformative mid-course civilizational corrections. As the International Panel on Climate Change warned us in 2018, we need rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented action in all aspects of our lives, starting now, if we want to avoid severe, widespread, and irreversible impacts. Those same adjectives apply to the loss of biodiversity. Of course, climate and biodiversity are only two of the many crises we confront right now, but I highlight them because they are so obviously manifest in our own backyard. The good news is that we are awakening to the seriousness of our situation and beginning to respond. We are learning about what is variously called the Great Awakening, the Great Realization, the Great Turning, the Great Reckoning, and the Great Acceleration. And if you don't recognize those terms, Dr. Google can help. Your own actions as council, including declaring a climate emergency, demonstrate an awareness of our current situation. And only a month ago, you wrote a letter to the Premier questioning Alberta's land use policy regarding coal mining in the Eastern Slopes. That was commendable, and I thank you for it. But I think you should now turn that same analytical lens back on the Bow Valley. If it helps, you might write another letter this year to yourself this time, questioning land use policy regarding large-scale development in scarce montane ecosystem habitat. Harvey Locke, who helped steer the United Nations World Commission on Protected Areas, has stated that if humanity hopes to survive long into the next century, it needs to create a world that will be 1, equitable, 2, carbon neutral, and 3, nature positive. We need urgently to begin building that world today with every decision that we make. I do not believe the ASPs as proposed are helping build that world. They are not, in my opinion, fit for the future plans. Here are some examples. The ASPs as proposed won't lead us to an equitable world we need. A majority of the houses built will be expensive, dark window, cold pillow, second or third or fourth vacation homes for come from away one percenters. This flies in the face of the NRCB decision report, which projected that around 70% of the homes built on Three Sisters lands would be for local full-time families. It further plays into the self-descriptive gates of wealth Canmore scenario, which was uniformly rejected by Mining the Future participants in 2006. Nor will the ASPs as proposed lead us to a carbon neutral future. There are some terrific things happening in the rest of the province right now when it comes to low carbon, net zero, and even net positive buildings and neighborhoods. Look to Blatchford Field and Landmark Homes in Edmonton, Drake's Landing in Okotoks, and even Spring Creek right here in town. Given the urgency of the climate breakdown, there should be no further development in the valley that doesn't have a compact, energy efficient footprint and doesn't include any buildings that aren't at absolute minimum energy labeled. And they should all, in fact, be net zero rated. As is, construction of climate crisis adapted housing in the ASPs appear to be largely conditional on awarding those builders who promise to be energy efficient with yet additional numbers of units to build. Logically, that's a self-defeating strategy. Nor did the ASPs as proposed contribute to a nature positive world. One of the first lessons anyone moving to Canmore learns is about corridors and just how valuable this narrow mountain constrained valley is for wildlife. And the truth is, if we fully took to heart what we now know about the biodiversity crisis and the man-made the sixth great extinction, not one additional square centimeter of this valley would be developed. We would join with the Stoney Nakoda nations in acknowledging that the valley and the surrounding mountains are much more than scenic objects to be exploited for profit, but are rather, as Chief John Snow once wrote, sacred places. Now, unfortunately, our colonial way of thinking doesn't let us all get all the way to sacred, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't let the perspective of respect, restraint, and of accommodating the needs of nature and natural systems inform our land use decision-making. The last thing we need is a massive 10-kilometer run of urban sprawl equivalent to 2 to 3 BAMPs, adding to the problems we've already created for ourselves. Please be God, we not willingly compound those problems, especially with other developments at Silvertip, Dead Man's Flats, and the old CB lands waiting in the wings. So what can we do? We can do lots, but let's start with the low-hanging fruit. Stick with the present urban growth boundary. That's easy, no change necessary. Stick with the current conservation of wildland zoning in Smith Creek. Again, easy, no change necessary. Stick with the current golf course district zoning for the unfinished golf course. Again, easy. Don't increase the allowable number of units above the numbers previously negotiated. Again, no change necessary, but while you're at it, you should scrap the bonusing incentive program. As well intended as it might have been, the bonusing system actually weaponizes both affordable housing and climate crisis adapted housing. It appears that the ASPs will allow us to have some of both, but only if we up the density of the project. And finally, I challenge you, I plead with you to embrace the proposal Reuben Nelson gifted us with yesterday. We have the chance here to define Canmore as a gold medal, world champion mountain community that, as Reuben so eloquently put it, is not only in the 21st century, but of the 21st century. If we want to, we can be the leader of the pack. To do that, though, we need a new vision of ourselves, of the future we want for our community and the valley within which it lies. To that end,
Mr. Robinson, I just wanted to do your 9-minute time check.
Thank you. To that end, before we make any decisions on a hugely consequential proposal, we need to put these hearings on pause and undertake a community-wide, First Nations included, town-hosted, collaborative dialogue that will surface our deepest values and aspirations and wrestle down the tough trade-offs that will emerge along the way. A specific vision for tourism could be an important subset of that project, but in no way can it substitute for the more encompassing project itself. With a newfound understanding of who we are and where we want to go, the community will be on the path to becoming a wise, fit for the future town, and it will be ready finally to make a wise, fit for the future decision on the future of our valley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bart, for joining this evening and sharing your well-considered remarks. I expected no less from you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from members of council for Bart? Seeing none, once again, thanks very much for joining in this evening and sharing your perspective.
You're welcome.
This time I'll ask Michael Mezzi to join us.
Yes. Are you okay? I'll start my video. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, sure are. You bet.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just by way of background, my wife Andrea and I bought a home in Canmore 4 years ago, and we've lived full-time in Canmore 2 years ago when I retired. So I don't have any technical expertise, but what I do bring is extensive experience and expertise in how to assess and make major decisions. And that really stems from my career. I was primarily an executive business. The last one was as president and a director of more investment management in Calgary. I've also sat on various not-for-profit boards, pension boards, industry associations, including businesses. And through that, I've become a student, being involved and a student of, what are sort of common, really good ways to go about assessing major decisions like the one in front of the town, whether it be an acquisition, a significant expansion, or a change. And where the starting place is really getting in touch with sort of the values and vision of whatever the organization is. So when I read the TSMV plan, I read and I saw a very compelling vision for a modern mountain village. And then I listened to Bow Valley Engage and some of the very strong and concerns with it. And I thought, well, what am I going to do with this? So what I did is went to that commonality. Just what is the strategic vision and plan for the town? And I was very glad that I found very quickly on the website the pretty recent plan that you are very familiar with, not 2019 to 22. And that's what I did. I just tried to, from an open mind, assess what I was reading from Three Sisters with what I was hearing from Bow Engage and others against that plan. So I went to the heart of it, the vision, the strengths, you all know it very well, but talked about the strengths of the community, threefold: heritage, long-term commitment to diversity of its people, and healthy mountain landscape. And I held that up against it. And the conclusion I came to is heritage. Heritage is in the town center primarily. Three Sisters can probably build a beautiful modern mountain village with lots of amenities, but I don't think that's heritage. Secondly, long-term commitment to diversity of its people. I really doubt, and I'm sure the town has much better stats than I have or could have access to. Mine's more anecdotal, but I believe that most of the people buying into new developments, like Stewart Creek or Spring Creek, are probably from a pretty narrow socioeconomic group, mostly second properties, probably a pretty narrow demographic. I don't know this. I suspect the town has better data than I do, but I really struggle to see how this would add to the diversity of Canmore's people. And healthy mountain landscape, many people have talked to that, taking green space, a buffer for recreation, for wildlife, and adding to the footprint, never mind the carbon footprint of Canmore. I don't see how that really aligns with a healthy mountain landscape. But I didn't stop there, so that's the vision. And then the town's done a very good job of then translating that into 6 goals and areas of focus. And as I would do in any exercise like this, I sort of held up these proposals against that and say, are they additive? Are they neutral? Or are they likely more detractive? It's not a perfect science, but clearly strong economy is additive. There's no question this would generate a lot of economic activity. But then detract, transportation would add to congestion. I know there's plans to deal with the immediate area, but coming in from Trans-Canada, it would definitely add to congestion. Environmental sustainability, we've talked to that already. Wildlife coexistence, they would all detract. Community, part of community is talking about the town center as a core to community, and livability, diversity. So, even if I'm generous and put those 2 in the neutral category, we've got 1 additive, 3 detractive, and 2 neutral. You put the 2 together, both of the 3 on vision and 1 for 6 on goals. So I think, the town would need to almost rethink its strategic plan to approve something like this. So that's one lens. A second lens is With organizations, it's, I think, really key, and the town's no different, to sort of right size it. We have a big tendency in North America, it's cultural, whether it's in business or government, in many contexts, sort of growth, sort of embedded growth's a good thing. But I think more modern thinking is, well, growth, sure, but for the right reasons. And the concept of right sizing, again, any organization or a town is huge. And part of right sizing is just recognizing what your constraints are. And in the Bow Valley, there are very real constraints. There's natural constraints. Obviously, it's a narrow mountain valley. There's a major river running through the middle. And then you add on the man-made constraints, 4-lane major highway, railroad, never mind getting into reservoirs and mines and so on. But the other big part of right sizing is focusing on the character and culture. And that's where I spent a lot of my, especially later part of my career, is, what is the true culture of, in this case, a mountain town? I love the outdoors. I love skiing, hiking, mountain biking. I've had the fortune to travel through, many mountain towns, and now live in Canmore for 2 years. And I can't say I've got the sort of the perfect feel yet for what the culture of a mountain town is all about. But when I observe places that I do feel have a strong culture, and I think we still do, places like Revelstoke, Nelson, Roslyn, I think there's some commonalities. One is they're all built around a historic town center, and there is one center, not two. Secondly, there is a good, healthy mix of full-time residents, part-time residents, and visitors, including tourists. 3, it's not too big or congested. We are talking about mountain towns, and congestion definitely detracts from the feel. So whether we're talking about number of people or footprint, or being able to recognize neighbors or shopkeepers when you go out. Fourthly, they all have a lot of locally owned and operated businesses. Ready access to recreation, wildlife nearby. So that's not a perfect list, but I think those are some of the common elements of a really strong mountain town culture that we want to preserve here, and not become a Whistler, a Vail, where essentially it's a really narrow socioeconomic group that can afford to be there, and essentially become really high-end, nice shopping malls, great cafes, restaurants, and bars, but basically it's a nice district in a mountain setting. So I don't know exactly what the tipping point is, but when I read the proposal, just with the increase in footprint, visitors, congestion, more people who aren't locals, I can't see that it's additive to culture. I think it would be pretty more likely to go the other way, and it would detract from the culture, whether it was your previous speaker who was here for over 50 years, or newer residents like who had talked to, like my wife and I 4 years ago. I think it's really would erode from culture. And then I'll wrap up with, I'm not against development at all. Obviously, I'm in the investment business my whole life. I live in a new development, relatively new in Silvertip, but I think it has to be done really thoughtfully. And the special challenge, I think, for Canmore and Council is places like Revelstoke and Nelson and Roslyn are a long way from any major city or airport. Canmore is obviously just over an hour away from a major airport in a major city. And likely, we build it, they will come. If something's built as nicely as what's on the paper from Three Sisters, probably people will come. But is that what we really want? Do we want a modern mountain village, a second hub, rather than focusing on the town center and building more within our current footprint?
Excuse me, Mr. Mezzi. I understand you're wrapping up. I wanted to give you your 9-minute time check.
Thank you. So I will wrap up and say that when I sort of used the experience that I have and how to assess these things, and fortunately, again, thank you for having a very clear strategic vision and plan for the town, I came to pretty obvious conclusion that this plan does not fit the vision or goals for the town. It's more likely to erode the character and culture of the mountain town or Canmore that we're all so proud of. And I would encourage council to sort of look at it through the same lens. And I'm pretty confident that when you do that, you'll come to the same conclusion to not approve the plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing your analysis and your approach to thinking about these matters to council this evening, Mr. Mezzi. I'm wondering if while you were doing this analysis, if you had factored in the wild card of the rapidly increasing pressure we're feeling here in the town of Canmore from the growth in the Calgary region. We certainly saw it this past summer, COVID summer, which was unusual, but the city is projected to double in size. I don't remember the latest figure in 20 years or something. And given we're an hour from the city, our town center particularly, and our well-loved recreational facilities, both indoors and out, are going to be pressured over the next decades from that, the number of people coming from the city. Did you factor that into your thinking at all?
Yeah, I guess it's part of the sort of the last point I was trying to make about it. It has to be done thoughtfully because there will be pressure. This is a beautiful place, only an hour from a really big city and really big airport. So the answer is more in taking the current footprint. I don't mean to like square inch, so maybe it needs to expand a little, but certainly nothing on the scale of what's being proposed, but focus more on our current footprint and whether we're talking about housing or congestion, the character of the town, just optimizing what we can within primarily that current footprint, as well as developing. We have, like, everybody goes, when you talk about Calgarians, they go to very few places. They go to Quarry Lake, they go to the Nordic Center, just trying to spread that out a little bit more, but that's, I think, more on the recreation front.
Okay, thank you again for bringing your perspective to share with council this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And I don't see any other questions from members of council, so we'll move on to the next speaker. Thank you very much. And now I'll ask Mr. Paul Hockhausen to join in.
Hi there, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to speak about this matter, and I'm going to keep my comments quite short and very simple. My name is Paul Hockhausen, and I'm a homeowner and live in Canmore. My wife and I have owned a home in Canmore for about 15 years, and we've lived here full-time for more than 2 years. We bought in Canmore to get away from the city, used to live in Calgary, and to live away from a large urban footprint, and we wanted to live in a place with a town feel. That's what we still find attractive about Canmore, and it's important for us to live in a place where we can coexist with nature and wildlife. I'm not against development per se, but I'm very concerned with the TSMV ASPs and the large extent of development and the potential effect on wildlife on adjacent lands. I also don't believe it is reasonable to rezone the golf course lands for housing. I'm also not interested in the large increase in Canmore's footprint and in a town double the existing size. I've written a letter to the town outlining some of my concerns, including these. I'm against the TSMV development proposals as is, but I don't believe we need to expand Canmore, especially not to this extent. I urge town council to reject these ASPs as written. And thanks for the opportunity to voice some of my concerns.
Thank you very much for joining in this evening, sir. Are there any questions from members of council? This speaker? Seeing none, again, thank you for taking the time to join us.
Okay, thank you.
Now I'll ask John Marriott to join in.
Hey, John, can you guys all see me?
Yeah, John, I love your hat.
Thank you. Thank you. Keep my house a little colder than the norm. So thank you for having me on tonight. I'll be quick and get straight to the point. I'll probably use up my full 10 minutes here. I'm going to start off by saying I don't think this will be a major surprise to most people on council, particularly those that know me already. that I am against both of these ASPs. And I want to go into one detail in particular, because a lot of what I would reiterate if I was given more than 10 minutes would be what other people have already reiterated or have already spoken to, including just the last two speakers right before me, talking about the town increasing in size and some of the issues with the undermining and losing the community feel and so on. But what I want to talk about is what I do personally and professionally for a living. I have lived here for 30 years. I'm a professional wildlife photographer. And so I want to just give you guys a little glimpse into my life in the past few months here. And so I'm going to just share my screen here quickly. So what I'm going to be talking about is connectivity and corridors, and we have had some wonderful presentations already from a number of scientists and biologists, and there's that new paper that has just come out. And so I want to touch a bit on all of that and bring it into sort of a personal bent for me. I, of course, make my full-time living from going out and finding these big, beautiful apex predators, and I chose to put this particular wolf on the cover slide here because this is the male 2001 that just died on March 8th, dispersed to Montana, was shot and killed by a rancher.
John, we can't see your screen if you're sharing it at this time.
Oh. Okay,
I'm looking forward to seeing this alpha wolf.
Are we getting anything yet?
No.
Okay. Let me go and fiddle around here a bit and see why we're not.
Maybe you're out shooting, photographing animals too much. You're not familiar with Zoom. There we go.
Familiar with the Zoom. There we go. Okay,
there we go.
We're good?
Yes.
Okay, so there's male wolf 2001, who was killed on March 8th, just a couple of days ago in Montana. And it really illustrates the critical importance of having connectivity and having corridors. And Dr. Jacob gave a wonderful presentation to you guys a couple nights ago talking about all this, and we've had several since then. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the science, but more about my personal experiences and where this ties in to the ASPs in particular. So we're fortunate, of course, in the Valley to have everything from the boss to cougars to wolves, lynx, wolverine, every single apex predator that is found in North America, basically outside of the jaguar and the ocelot, we happen to have here in Canmore, which is pretty amazing. And I think we all appreciate that, whether it's all the way from the developers to the hardcore wildlife advocates like myself. I want to introduce you guys now to, I just finished doing cougar conservation project that I spent really 31 days in a row, January 1st to 31st, and spent the mornings in Banff and the afternoons and evenings in Canmore. And I want to introduce you to one of the cougars that I ran into. So this is a female cougar that lives between the Alpine Club of Canada and Gap Lake, basically. She very occasionally crosses the 1A highway, but not very often. She pretty much hangs out where all those sheep are and everything, and she's a beautiful animal. Super skittish, very shy, exactly how we want our cougars, but she's kind of tucked into this one little corner, this one little sort of sections of habitat patches, and doesn't really connect outside of it very often. And so I want to talk a bit about not the corridors on the side that everybody's been talking about the last few days, but the corridors on the other side, on that Gap Lake, Alpine Club of Canada side, and why it is so important that the Smith Creek corridor and the TSMV Three Sisters corridor stays as big as humanly possible, and why it's important that we keep the golf course as free as possible of development. So let's take a look at the ASP map that they put out here, and I put in this big red arrow. This is the corridor that basically we're counting on. This is the one that right now exists pretty fully there because there is no Smith Creek development and there's nothing out on that golf course. And so animals can just flow pretty freely through there. This is the area that I was concentrating most of my work on this winter. So that oval kind of pinky color that I put up there between the Indian Flats Local Habitat Patch and Gap Lake on the north side of Highway 1A. So you'll see if we go and actually do the Smith Creek ASP and fully develop the golf course and everything, we're really going to be taking a big chance with that corridor on the bottom of our screen there. And you'll see I've just turned that into a dotted line. Why that is so critical, if we were to pinch that off completely, Dr. Aaron Jacob already mentioned the other day that we're down to about 25% of historical movement around town from our predators and our wildlife. On the north part of town, we actually have almost no connectivity whatsoever. It just, they come around on a beautiful corridor up through Montaigne and get across Cougar Creek, and then they basically just run into a dead end. There's a giant quarry there, there's a highway, there's a railway, then there's another highway, there's a river. There's all sorts of stuff along there, the dog kennels and trails and so on, and a bunch of pinch points that are even just natural. So I want to talk a bit about that. This is the same little portion of the new study that Dr. Aaron Jacob pulled up. And you'll notice here I have highlighted just a little section of the current. That's the area that I was walking around in for 31 straight days, seeing almost no sign of wildlife other than this one cougar. And certainly no connectivity, no wolves cruising through there, no grizzly bears, of course, this time of year, but no lynx, nothing like that moving around in 31 straight days in there. And you can see that fits this data perfectly. That's exactly what they predict and say is already happening up there. So why is it happening? Well, let's take a look. I just took these photos this morning. This you can actually see, so this is the industrial park. And then there's the area where kind of just above the Alpine Club. And then you've got the area up above where G8 used to be, the mountain bike and hiking trail. And way up above that is actually what is left of the corridor on the north side of the valley. And so I want to give you a couple different perspectives of that. There it is again from down on 1A. You can see how far up on the hillside it is. It's way the F up there. Pardon my French. So let's take a look at it now a little closer, zoom in on it. You can see there's a big canyon there. Animals literally have to climb cliffs to get up into there and then cross over. And it's a little tiny patch. It's about 100 meters of trees, very, very steep. And so today I actually went and walked up there because I thought, what better? You guys have been looking at maps and arrows and all sorts of stuff. And I thought, I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to show you guys what it's actually like out there if I was a cougar or a wolf or a grizzly bear trying to connect through that part of the valley. So let's take a look at the video. So this is the steep hill that I had to climb up just to get to that little corridor that I was talking about, that so-called corridor. And you can see down below me here, really nowhere for the wildlife to go down there.
I'm actually standing in the so-called corridor on the north side of the 1A between Gap Lake and the west side of Canmore. And it is not a corridor at all. It's incredibly steep. Took me forever to get up here, much beyond the angle that wildlife corridors are supposed to be. And it's tiny. It's super narrow up here. I'm just basically on the ledge and looking straight over a cliff down into the quarry.
So to me, there is so much at stake here, not just for my job, but for our community, for our wildlife. I could care less about my job. I can move somewhere else if I really had to and still be a professional wildlife photographer, but I don't want to have to. I love being able to be in a place that has all this wonderful wildlife. And it's funny, a quick little story. I went with my wife down to Bend, Oregon.
Marriott?
Yeah.
I just wanted to give you your 9-minute time check.
Perfect. I've got 59 seconds left here. Went down to Bend, Oregon, and we're sitting in a pub having a beer, sitting beside a local and started chatting. And they said they had been to Canmore and they said, do not let your community become like we did. We sold out. We've got development all over the place. We're 80,000 people now. It is nothing like when I first moved here 40 years ago. And he said, I hate it. I want to leave every single day, but I still stay here because I got nowhere else to go. So I wanted to mention, we have literally 999 cuts so far. There's the cumulative effects that Aaron Jacob was talking about. And do we really want to take that 1,000th cut, take that chance that what we do next is going to completely pinch off wildlife in this valley. I don't think it's worth the trade-off to get more affordable housing and all the associated risks that will be posed to our wildlife and to our community. And so I urge you all to please turn down both of these ASPs. And I really hope you think about your legacy being on council and being mayor as you go forward with this vote. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John. And thanks for taking the time today to go out there and walk the land that you wanted to talk about this evening. I appreciate all of the effort you've put into this. Are there any questions of council for Mr. Marriott? Seeing none, thanks again for taking all the time to put this together and to joining with us this evening.
Thank you, John.
This time I'll ask Donna Cunnin to join us.
Wow, I don't really want to follow him now. That was stunning. Oh, that was amazing. Anyway, here I am. No pictures of beautiful cats, but good evening, Mayor Barman and councillors and all our virtual people who are out there. We know there's been many. I'm here tonight to join this long list of people from our town who are opposed to the Three Sisters Mountain Village proposal and the 2 area structure plans. My name is Donna Cunnin, and we have lived in Canmore for 14 years, off and on, part-time. I am not an expert biologist, nor do I claim to fully understand undermining. But from what I have been able to read and learn about this proposal, the TSMV project, I can't support this development, and I would suggest neither should you. There are so many risks associated with a 30-year plan. And there are many risks associated with so many pieces of this structure plan. And that information has been very well documented by some very learned people. I was going to talk about the vision statement, but Michael Mezzies did such a good job of clearly analyzing that. I looked at that as well and thought, as a template to bounce this development off of, I really think you can't. They don't go together. So the vision statement doesn't support the development plan. And Michael went through that far better than I was going to. And I noticed on your website that you reinforced that council strategic plan, I think in 21, and you support this vision, obviously, and you talk about making balanced decisions, which is a great idea. I too am not anti-development. I think it's not a black and white issue. I understand the economics of a town that we require development. But I think for me, I'm solution oriented, and I think that the process is wrong. And what I mean by that is that we need the town to have the leadership to encourage the kind of development that more people here would be proud to say, let's lead, let's look at us. Someone mentioned earlier, let's be the gold medal town that we are, right? And this public hearing, wow, it's reinforced for me how many outstanding people live in this community. Many, that's too many presenters have such wide and deep knowledge in the areas of wildlife, environmental, and alpine science. It's stunning, like it's something to be celebrated. So I think Canmore should become a world leader in these areas. And it seems to me that all these experts are working in all these pods in different basements for nonprofit organizations, underfunded, trying to make a difference with invaluable research. So I say, let's make Canmore become a national, why not international, a life and physical sciences institute, where we bring all these amazing people together. That's the kind of development that I think teachers, students, policymakers, and all of us would support. It would create jobs. It would bring in taxes. It would be a fantastic thing. And it's here. It's ready for the picking as far as I can see. I really would love to see this become the educational hub. It would be a development that I could support, and I'm sure many people could support. How do you do that? I'm not exactly sure, but there's enough smart people in this town that I know we could figure it out. I think the town needs to drive the development with the community input and the engagement, and not be left reacting to the developers. It's always a reaction and then as we've seen historically, empty promises. So in brief and in submission, I just say, please listen to your community, and obviously you are, because we've all been given this amazing opportunity. You have the opportunity to create an amazing legacy for Canmore. Our elected officials are the ones that make the final decision, and in my mind, it's not what you want to leave behind, this Three Sisters Mountain Village. I believe a sustainable vision is entirely possible. And I thank you for listening to me and to all of the people that have had the opportunity to speak over the last couple of days and evenings. And thank you for your time. It's been a long marathon.
And several days to go yet, apparently. But thank you very much for being here this evening. And just out of interest sake, you raised the interest in really emphasizing the excellence in research and education that we could encourage in Canmore. And we have been working with a number of institutes to try to develop in that sector. And the University of Saskatchewan, as it happens, is quite interested in developing a satellite campus here in the town of Canmore to expand their water sciences lab work. And coincidentally, they're
read that, and it's fantastic, right? So
yeah, and they're looking to locate on the other small piece of Three Sisters lands that's under application for approval, the gateway area just at the interchange as you come off the Trans-Canada Highway.
yeah, I saw that. So
yeah, so there is some reason to be hopeful that we can develop a subsector, another economy, another economic sector in the town of Canmore.
I think that's fantastic. So.
Yeah. Are there any questions at this time for Ms. Cunnin? Seeing none, thanks very much for taking the time to join us this evening.
Thank you. Good night.
I'll invite one more speaker, and then I think we'll take a short break after this speaker. And so I'll invite Brad Watson to join us.
Brad is here, but I'm wondering if perhaps he stepped away from his computer. He's not responding to my prompts to start his mic. So we could move on to Mark.
Mark Uranu?
Yeah, I was going to leave that for you to pronounce.
Mark
Unrau.
Unrau. Thanks, Mark.
Well, thanks for having
Thank
me
you.
tonight. This is my partner, Christine. She's joining me tonight.
Christine.
Hello.
We are both residents of Canmore. I've been living here in the Bow Valley for 11 years, and the last 5 right here in Three Sisters. And I'm a small business owner here in town. Christine and I have both read the current ASPs for Smith Creek and Three Sisters. As well, we have attended the Three Sisters information sessions that they hosted in an effort to better understand the development proposals. I'd like to now hand it over to Christine.
So I have to apologize. We're both not public speakers. I'm sure many people are not.
That's okay. You know, none of us are all that good at public speaking.
So I'm a little nervous, but I drew the short straw. So I'm going to read with something short. Anyway, I would like to thank you, Mayor Borman, and councillors for giving us the opportunity to speak this evening. As Mark said, he's a longtime resident of the Valley, but I'm a relatively new Canmorite. I've just moved here. It'll be 2 years next month. We're in awe of this wonderful community and feel a deep sense of privilege to call Canmore home. We've been following the presentations made by local experts and residents about their concerns regarding the proposed developments in Three Sisters and Smith Creek. We certainly aren't experts on undermining or wildlife or biology, and we ask council to consider all of the wonderful recommendations and suggestions and the concerns of so many experts that have been on here presenting. We're just here as simple residents of this exceptional community and want to offer our voice in these proceedings. We both oppose the area structure plans for Three Sisters, as well as Smith Creek, as they currently stand. We're not opposed to development. We understand the need for growth in the town of Canmore, and we understand that these lands are some of the last remaining lands available for development. With that being said, we feel the scope and tremendous size of the current ASPs do not align with the core characteristics that define Canmore. The current proposals would, as you know, double the residential units that were previously approved in the Canmore land use bylaws. We're concerned about the impact for wildlife. The proposed smaller to frankly ridiculously narrow corridor would most certainly impact and potentially stifle the ability of wildlife to navigate through the area. We're concerned with regard to undermining and the potential financial risks to the community and taxpayers should any part of the proposed mitigation fail. And we feel that the conservation wildland should not be rezoned for development in Smith Creek. And one last thing, Canmore's growth boundary, we feel it should remain as it was set in the 1998 Municipal Development Plan. As I said before, we're not opposed to development, but the tremendous size of the current ASPs, we just feel it's way too big. We ask council to reject both the Three Sisters and Smith Creek ASPs and to honor the town's land use bylaw, to uphold the urban growth boundary, and to protect the ability of elk, wolves, bears, and all wildlife to travel freely through our valley and remain connected to habitat beyond Canmore. That's it. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I don't want to put you on the spot at all, but I'll just ask this question because others have referenced this as well in the context of not being opposed to development, just the proposed scale people are not comfortable with. And many people, including yourselves, have referenced the DC 198 unit count in the land use bylaw. So am I correct in assuming then if development was approved at that level, that as proposed in 1998 with the unit count that's currently in the land use bylaw, you would find that a reasonable development?
We might. I'd have to go back and look. There's been so much paperwork. Honestly, we've tried to understand as best we can. I mean, there's been so many area structure plans for these Three Sister lands. I think most recently we saw the 2004 ASP that was presented that left the golf course open for wildlife. It was just a much smaller footprint. So I would say that we would likely be in support of a smaller development that would keep the wildlife corridor, I mean, as close to the size as it was in the 2004 proposal.
And if there had to be development, then in smaller increments, maybe not an approval of the entire thing in one big go, because it'd be nice to see we start in a small area, especially also have a concern with the commercial development as well. There's the promises of this commercial, but living here in Three Sisters, it's a sea of houses. And we have one little commercial area here and there's not much more. And there hasn't really been proof in my mind that the commercial will come. The houses will come certainly, but the commercial, will it come? There's no guarantee of that. So if we started small and then maybe go through another ASP process to then continue development, see how it is. But so the scale of it right now, certainly, yeah, like we're definitely opposed to that because there's no turning back.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered the question.
It helps a little bit. And of course, well, perhaps you're not familiar. Who's familiar with ASPs until you get it on the council? But the ASPs, all of the ASPs that exist today in Canmore contain phasing, so that 100% of the development in the ASP is not approved to start tomorrow. It's phased over sometimes decades. So just wanted to note that an ASP doesn't automatically entitle the developer to do everything at their own timeline. In any case, I really appreciate you taking the time this evening to join us and give up some of your, what is this, Thursday evening? And
Thank you.
yeah, all right. So again, thank you very much. And at this time, I think I need to call a short break. And we will break until 7:10 and resume the public hearing at that time.
Hi, Sarah. I had a
Okay. I think I'll call the public hearing back to order, and I see we got a new Hillstead listening in. Next to be invited to join in is Mr. Brad Watson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Okay, I'm just started the video.
Yep, can see you.
Okay, sorry about the delay. Of course, sitting in the waiting room, bad things happen and my computer froze up.
Oh, great. Wouldn't you know?
So thank you, Mayor Borman and Town Council, for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts regarding the Three Sisters Mountain Village area structure plans. And thank you for your hard work and dedication for our unique town. My name is Brad Watson, and I have lived in the Canmore area for over 30 years. My wife and I have raised our two sons in this wonderful town. It's been very humbling and inspiring to listen to all the passionate citizens of our town and our First Nation neighbors over the last several days. My main concern with the two area structure plans from TSMV is the sheer scale of the development, which will alter our town for years to come and have effect on future generations. Are the two area structure plans proposed by TSMV going to be a net benefit for our community? And I think lots of people have put input into that question. Firstly, I'd like to talk about the Smith Creek ASP, which I feel needs to be rejected outright due to serious flaws. The Smith Creek area ASP would require changes to the municipal development plan to increase the urban development zone at the expense of a wildlife conservation zone on the eastern side of the ASP. This is a very important junction for wildlife movement into the Bow Valley from the Wind Valley and Scoggins Pass from Kananaskis. The lands designated as the wildlife corridor to the south of the Smith Creek ASP within the municipal lands are constricted by narrowing of the valley and the steep slopes to the south. The use of a wildlife fence as a hard boundary between the developed lands and the wildlife corridor is an experiment that has not been proven and will most likely reduce the effective width of the wildlife corridor. I feel the negative issues associated with the wildlife corridor in the Smith Creek ASP are alone reason enough to reject this proposal. That being said, there are multiple of negative issues that would need to be resolved that have already been eloquently been put forward by concerned citizens and neighbors. In regards to the Three Sisters Mountain Village area structure plan, I will talk on a few aspects of the proposal that will require further study or modifications before it could be acceptable for second reading. One suggestion is that the ASP should be broken down into more manageable staged areas so that the risks can be evaluated through time before the project could proceed and after defined milestones are achieved. The ASP for Three Sisters Mountain Village should be modified with a risk management analysis approach. The modified ASP should clearly evaluate the potential risks highlighted by the concerned citizens and the potential mitigation as well as the residual risk. The proposal is before it is moved to successive readings by council. All major risks due to this development should be guided by the precautionary principles to ensure that the risk is low as reasonably practical. The major risk of the proposal development that I would like to address due to time constraints are the risk of ineffective wildlife corridors, the risk of developing on undermanned lands, and the financial risks to the town and citizens. The risk of ineffective wildlife corridors is the ultimate risk to wildlife is if we do not get this right, it could mean possible extinction for species in our area. As stated before, the proposed wildlife fence as a hard boundary between the development and the wildlife corridor is an experiment and will likely reduce the effect of the width of the corridor. The idea that animals should be comfortable traveling close to a fence with development right on the other side does not make sense to me. I believe that the use of buffer zones, such as the unfinished golf course, would make the wildlife corridor more effective. I feel that the proposed corridors, given the length and the width, we would be creating a wildlife racetrack to skirt the town of Canmore rather than a movement corridor. I'm not sure how to inform the wildlife that they will be disqualified from the race if they go outside their lanes. The risk of building on undermined lands. I thought that Garrett Brown did an excellent job this morning highlighting the risk of developing on undermined lands. In the ASP, I did not find a comprehensive plan to further delineate the risks in these areas and mitigating these risks. A comprehensive plan should be included in a modified ASP or an addendum. Once the plan is submitted, it will require an expert third-party review to accept this plan. In regards to this, to some of the mitigations proposed in the SP are very confusing, whether the proponent would use a fly ash surley or a concrete or something in between. There is significant difference in the compressive strength of these two materials. In regards to the mitigation proposed in the ASP, issues relating to groundwater effects and potential leachates with the use of these backfilling materials requires further investigation before the ASP can be accepted. Moving on to prevent potential financial risks to the town of Canmore and hence our taxes. The risk due to subsidence in the undermined lands has been discussed at length over the last few days. The amount of $5 million as a surety bond and the time period of 2 or 10 years set out by the proponents seem woefully inadequate. The lack of income from commercial taxes to the town is a risk to increasing our taxes, and a process to make this happen in the bylaws is a must. In conclusion, I oppose the Smith Creek ASP and the Three Sisters Mountain ASP that requires major modifications and studies before it can go to second reading. Also, there needs to be meaningful consultation with our First Nations peoples by the proponent. I thank you for the opportunity to speak as a concerned citizen, and I applaud your patience and dedication, Mayor and Town Council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Watson, and thank you for taking the time on Thursday evening to join in and share your thoughts with us.
My pleasure.
It's been quite amazing to hear from such a large number of residents. So thank you for joining in this evening.
Thank you.
And at this time, I'll ask that Carson Hoyer join us.
Good evening, John and council members. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, do you think you'll be able to fill 10 minutes, Carson?
Not sure. I apologize ahead of time here. I tried going without my glasses to eliminate the robotic reflection in my eyes here, but I'd be squinting quite closely. So my name is Carson Hoyer. I'm a 25-year resident of the town of Canmore. I've also worked as a wildlife biologist and continue to work as a wildlife biologist for that time. And just thank you very, very much for the extent to which you're hearing the breadth and depth of concerns about the ASPs here through this prolonged public hearing. It's much appreciated. I have deep concerns, and I'd like to register my opposition to both ASPs as proposed. As a community member, but tonight I'm going to speak strictly as a wildlife biologist. So I just get going here. I'm going to share a screen and just ask if you can see this.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So, we've heard quite a bit from town councillors over the last several days that wildlife corridors are the jurisdiction of the province. And I just want to really nail home at the beginning here that you do have the power to improve the wildlife corridors as they've been approved by the province, because they've been approved inadequately. And there's a 2002 precedent where previous town councils did this. And that was with respect to the resort center ASP. And it was with respect to the wildlife corridor above the unfinished golf course, which at the time was broadly recognized as not being based on the most recent science and was inadequate. And it was a town-led process that involved citizens and consultants that went out to investigate what could be done. It was the 2002 Golder Report, which was sponsored by the town, made a number of suggestions, which were then adopted by the province to amend that wildlife corridor so it was a little bit better. In addition to that, through the 2004 Resort Center ASP, town used zoning, the golf district and the recreation district zoning on the unfinished golf course to further buffer that corridor by 300 to 450 meters. So there is precedence for doing this, and that is through zoning. You have full power of zoning. So really what you need are reasons to exercise that power, and that's why I'm here tonight, and why so many people have spoken before me and will after me. But you also need courage, and this is not something that I can give you. It's something that you have to reach deep within yourselves to find. So reason one why this matters is because Canmore, as you know, is situated in a regional wildlife corridor. It's a really important link between Banff National Park to the west and Kananaskis Country to the east. And so what happens here has repercussions not just for our local wildlife that we see every day, but for regional wildlife populations. Reason two is that extends at a continental scale from Yellowstone to Yukon. We happen to be in the most developed valley in the entire world where grizzly bears still exist. Now, if that isn't a red flag that tells us that we are close to, if not already beyond the threshold by which we may cut these movements, these continental movements in half, then I don't know what is. So we have to proceed with the utmost of caution in how we go about this. Reason three is this area is actually used extensively today. So here, I'm just going to spend a few seconds orienting you on this map. In yellow are the proposed footprints of the proposed area structure plan. So to the left here, where my cursor is the village ASP, and to the right, I've just drawn in the footprints of the Smith Creek ASPs. Top left, you can just see a little road network. That's Peaks of Grassy, the power line. This development in between the two proposed ASPs, the Stewart Creek, is the Three Sisters interchange here. All right, so let's just have a look at some of the locations of radio-collared grizzly bears that have occurred in this valley. And this was back in 2001 to 2003. So just before we get going here and looking at this in a little more detail, I just want to point out that the Stewart Creek area, somewhat tragically, is now unavailable to grizzly bears. So all those locations you're seeing where Stewart Creek is now actually don't exist for those grizzly bears anymore. But what I really want to point out on this slide is the fact that of the available movement routes around the town of Canmore, the one on the south facing slope, so on the north side of the valley above Eagle Terrace, Silver Tip, and Cougar Creek, is virtually abandoned. It's not being used by those grizzly bears. The one that is being used to link Banff National Park and Kananaskis is the area that we're talking about today. It's the Three Sisters corridor. So that's super, super important to realize that of the remaining wildlife routes, that are working for grizzly bears, the Three Sisters corridor is the most important. This now is a slide of more recent wolf GPS locations from 2012 to 2020, and it shows much the same patterns. First of all, you can see it's basically a tide of locations to the west of us here coming out of Banff National Park. And then you can see how the town of Canmore is already acting as a selective filter. And again, fewer movements squeaking through on the south-facing slopes above Eagle Terrace than is happening on the north-facing slopes of Three Sisters to again link Banff National Park with the Wind Valley and then Kananaskis country beyond. You'll also notice that the vast majority of these locations occur in the valley bottom. They are not selecting the steep slopes. Reason 4 is that projections looking forward do not paint a pretty picture once you start accounting for the kind of disturbance that would happen through these proposed developments. So I've heard a number of speakers tonight refer to the recent paper that has been just come out and is in the process of being peer reviewed right now by probably one of the smartest men in this valley, along with some of the most preeminent wildlife biologists in North America, Jesse Whittington, Mark Hebbleway from the University of Montana, Adam Ford from the University of British Columbia. So this is basically they developed a model, and this is what it predicts is happening today, which pretty much aligns with the actual data that I just showed you in the previous slide in red. And then in the pink areas, so the wolf movements are in blue, and then these pink areas are the proposed Three Sisters developments. So the next slide, moving forward into the future, once those are in place, essentially cut off all that wolf movement on the north-facing side and push a little bit more over onto the south-facing slopes. But whether or not that would actually happen is unclear. So again, I'm just going to toggle back and forth a little bit today and then into the future. So we have a very clear idea there of what might happen. And I have to say, this model is developed from the data from 34 radio-collared wolves that are using this landscape. And in fact, most of the locations around Canmore here have just occurred in the last few months, as if the wolves themselves are telling us the importance of this area under consideration. So this model is much more robust, much more relevant, much more recent, and much more current than the modeling that was done by the Three Sisters consultant. So now let's dig in a little bit as we go into what we can actually do about this moving forward. And I've just sketched in a few things on this map here. I've plotted the slopes that are over 25 degrees in steepness in red.
Excuse me, Mr. Hoyer. I just wanted to give you your 9-minute time check.
Okay, great. I'm just going to jump ahead here. Okay, I'll submit this as a written proposal as well to you, so you can refer to this. But these areas in red are what need to be widened for wildlife to actually move through this area in a reasonable format. So what I'm proposing is that the area is significantly shrunk down so that instead of what Three Sisters is proposing here, this might work for wildlife. I'm not saying it would work for undermining and all the other risks that people have been talking about from the community, but it might be what could work for wildlife. It's significantly smaller. So we need to remember in all our considerations here is that of any landowners that have ever owned this property, the current land ownership group is probably the best positioned to do the right thing here. They sold the lands at the height of the 2008 real estate market just before the crash, and they bought them back out of receivership for $12.5 million. They can truly afford to do the right thing. We should not be taking any risks on their behalf or for their benefit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Are there any questions from members of council for Carson? See none, but really appreciate you finding the time to join in. I know you'd scheduled earlier and then couldn't make it, presumed for work reasons, so I'm pleased that you could join in this evening, and you indicated you'd had or will be sharing all of the written all of the maps as part of your written submission.
Yes, I will. So thanks again for your time tonight and for considering the broad and widespread and diverse concerns of our community.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, good night.
Good night. At this time, I'll ask Kristen Slagorski to join in.
I'm just setting up my screen share here. All right, thanks for your patience with that. So, my name is Kristen Spangenberg. I've been a resident of the Bow Valley for the last 8 years. I work locally as a therapist, and I'm currently taking some studies in art therapy. So my intent tonight is to bring kind of a different creative approach to my presentation. So we're starting with home is where the heart is. I'm hoping to speak a bit more from the heart. I don't have the expertise to speak to the more technical aspects of these proposals. I imagine at this stage in this process that you guys are probably feeling kind of like this guy. He's got the glazed zoom eyes going, and probably you've got like a just keep swimming mentality. And I really want to say a deep thank you for listening so well to our community, listening deeply, persevering through these long days. I can't imagine what it's like to be at the computer all day. So thank you for that. And I also want to say thank you to our community. As I've been tuning in over the last few days, I've been so inspired by the heart of our community. And it's been interesting to have this balance of sort of technical and passionate kind of coming together to shape the community voice. And I think what I'm witnessing actually is a bit of a transformation in our community. There's a quote in the art therapy world that in our creating, we are created. And if I think about where we're at as a community, we are where we are because we've all contributed to that. The beautiful parts of living here, the tensions that we exist with living here, we've all contributed to that. And I think we all need to be part of the solution. So all of this sort of begs the question of who are we as a community? What are we building towards? What do we want? And I really feel like it's a transformation point. I can't think of any time in history that I know of, which is a shorter period in Canmore, but where we've seen this much engagement from the community. So that tells me that there's something really important that's happening here. And within that, we're hearing a lot of collective concerns. I won't, drill down into these. People have spoken more eloquently to each of these points than I can. What I will say is that I do align with these concerns. I am in opposition to both of the two proposals as they're currently presented for these reasons. And I think they're worth exploring more. Another big one that really stands out for me is this 30-year timeline. And though it's phased, I don't know that there's enough controls in place for this to feel like a comfortable number for the community. So if we all take like a trip back in memory lane to 1991, who you were at that time, what you were doing, what you believed about the world, and all the things that have happened since then to change your opinion or grow your understanding or, sideswipe you out of nowhere. Life is full of surprises, and this 30-year timeline is very uncomfortable for the town. I also think that it's important that we don't think of time as just this linear thing. Now is a reflection of all that's come before us, and so we've heard from other speakers some of the resentments and anger, the frustration about some of the past developments that have happened. And likewise, the decisions that we make today will drastically impact the future generations coming after us. For me, this includes my nieces and nephews who attend school here. I'm wanting to leave the community in a better place when we're all moving on. By moving on, I mean passing away. So not leaving the valley, hopefully. So if this year has taught us anything, it's that the pack matters. And I don't just mean the animal packs, but I also mean them. But I mean collectively we impact one another. Each of us has the ability to drastically shape what the experience is like for the rest of us. And I think we need to start thinking more in the collective than in the individual. COVID has also taught us that interconnectivity matters. So again, this is also about the wildlife corridors, but I think it applies to our place in the universe. We're interconnected with nature, we're interconnected with the other species. So we really need to think about this quite broadly and not just get really kind of in this tunnel of this proposal's before me. We need to hold that proposal in the broader context. So what will we tell the next generations about this moment in Canmore's history? I would like to be able to tell them that we came together, that we took our time and gathered information, that we listened to one another's concerns and hopes. I'd also like to be able to tell them that we actively shaped the future with care, that we learned from some development challenges that we've already experienced and have grown from. I would like to tell them that we were hard-headed where it mattered. And so, you know, Karsten just spoke about courage, and I do not envy the position that all of you are in. I think it's a tremendous responsibility, but also a burden to be making these kinds of decisions for the town. But I would ask for these specific requests, so upholding the current zoning in both of the ASP areas, rejecting changes to Canmore's growth boundary, giving the wildlife corridors legal land designation, so this is the zoning Karsten spoke to, amend the land use bylaws to require performance-based net zero construction standards, maintain the limits on the residential units that are already in the land use bylaw. And I'd also like to be able to tell our future generations that we were accountable and we held one another accountable, that we set a high standard. So for me, that means not undermining, not building on undermined lands. Specifically for municipal infrastructure, I am not comfortable with this idea of passing on the responsibility to the homeowners. That does not feel like a good neighbor thing to do to me. I'd like the phasing to be connected in future ASPs to incremental approvals from the community. I think what we're seeing collectively in all of these presentations is that there is a problem of trust and buy-in. I do not want to see our community torn apart by this. I'd also like to see some relationship building. So relationship building with our Indigenous neighbors, but also relationship building between the developers and all the external experts and stakeholders. We have heard from so many tremendous speakers over the last few days. I am completely in awe at the expertise that exists in our tiny little community. And lastly, I'd like to see us take a holistic approach to planning and development. One of the speakers this morning, she was an urban planner, and she talked about this holistic approach. And I really believe that this is important for shaping our community. And so this is a tall order. It's a lot to ask. And at the same time, I think it's the work of our community at this time. So we could view this as a challenge, or we could view this as a time of coming alive as a community, of regeneration and growth.
Excuse me, Ms. Spangenberg. I just wanted to give you your 9-minute time check.
Well, that's perfect. This is my last slide. So yeah, I guess I just want to say, like, I believe in our community. I have hopes for where we can go together. I'm impressed with the skills that we have. I think we can find a better arrangement than is being currently proposed. And I hope council will consider each of the presentations as they come up in your overall decisions. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time this evening and for putting together this your PowerPoint and considering the issues carefully. We appreciate that. Are there any questions from members of council? Seeing none, thanks again for taking this time on Thursday evening to join with council and share your perspective on the ASPs.
Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
Thank you. At this point, I'll ask Lyle Schumacher to join us.
Ooh, it's backlit. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, and see you.
All right, good evening, Mayor Borman and members of Town Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about my opposition to the two ASPs recently presented and approved on first reading by Council. I am a resident of Canmore. I live in the South Canmore area. I've watched the council meeting that approved first reading, well, quite a bit of it. It was pretty long, so I can't say I watched all of it. But I did watch undermining information session by TSMV, the Bow Valley Engage session. I've reviewed the ASPs in a fair amount of detail, and I've watched hours of the public hearing. I feel I've gained an appreciation for the details of the proposals, and through many conversations with local residents, I feel seems to be a majority, almost all residents that I've been talking to are against the developments as they are proposed. I agree with the many concerns already presented in the public hearing, but I'll be brief tonight in respect for your time and not repeat them all. Summary of my main points are: first, I don't feel that the golf course not being viable is a reason to turn the current zoning of these golf course lands into the most dense development in the TSMB area. Chris Ollenberger even stated during the undermining information session that I watched that the abandoned golf course lands were originally required due to wildlife concerns, and that's why they were there. So to change this zoning from the original ASP seems to be against who we are as a community in regard to wildlife conservation. I believe these public hearings have shown there's very little support for a change to this. I believe the community has only become more engaged and sensitive to conservation than we were when the 2004 Resort Center ASP was approved. So it seems like a step in the opposite direction at this time to be, biting off a bigger chunk of that area. Secondly, kind of the whole idea of the hard edge fence. I don't think we should be swayed by a concept that the hard edge fence at or near the property line will be better than many hectares of soft edge that the current zoning line provides. I'm sure there are instances where the concept of the hard edge is better, but I don't think we can assume it makes sense here. There are too many unknowns to allow for development that can't be undone if this fence proves problematic. Putting up walls to separate us from wildlife just seems wrong in a community that prides itself on living in unison with our wildlife neighbors. Lastly, I'm not supportive of increasing the urban growth boundary at all. We should not capture any more conservation land in this sensitive area and allow for further urban growth. So I want to thank you all for your service to the community and for standing up for the vision of Canmore that has been presented by many people during this public hearing. I encourage you to outright reject these proposals as presented. Send a strong message to the developer that excessive development that compromises the vision of Canmore residents will not be allowed. And I'd like to see Canmore set an example of appropriate development in a very sensitive environment. Thank you for your time. And is there any questions?
Hey, that's my line. I get to ask if there's any questions. Are there any questions of members of council? I don't think there are, Mr. Schumacher. So, but thanks very much for taking the time to be here. Starting to sound like I'm saying that by rote, but I mean it genuinely to everybody. It's one of the really great things about living in Canmore is the involvement of all of our residents. So again, thank you for taking the time to be here this evening.
Yeah, it's not something I commonly do. So yeah, it was nice to be able to take the opportunity. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
You bet.
Okay.
Thank you. This time I'll invite Michelle McDonald to come to join us.
I'm all good.
You're with us, you bet.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for allowing me to speak today in opposition to the Spring Creek Mountain Village and Smith Creek ASPs as they currently stand. My name is Michelle McDonald. I have lived in Canmore since 1993 and have been coming with my family since 1984. There have been many changes. For the most part, these changes have made Canmore an incredible place to live. I believe we are now on the cusp of making changes that will forever harm the fundamental nature of this unique place that we all call home. Future development in our town needs to be done in a socially, environmentally, and economically responsible way. Supposedly, this is the triple bottom line mantra that we are telling ourselves we want to live by. Do these proposals, as they stand now, satisfy the triple bottom line approach? How can this development be built and not harm the wildlife that call this area home? And who's going to speak for this wildlife if it's not us? How can we keep our proclaimed climate goals for the town while pouring millions of tons of concrete into the ground and above it and heating thousands and thousands of new homes? How can we justify turning a designated wildlife conservation area into more development by changing our municipal boundaries? Why should we as taxpayers be penalized when we will have to eventually pay for the damage to municipal infrastructure caused by undermined collapse? Why should our taxes go up because we don't get the promised commercial tax base? Is a close to potential doubling of our population in the best interests of our social fabric? Is it going to make Canmore a better place to live? So, who does the approval of these ASPs as they stand now benefit? It's not the wildlife, it's not our planet, it's not our town, and it's not our people. So who then? Development in our town is going to happen, and that's okay. We need more affordable housing. We all like our rec centers, our libraries, our restaurants, our good shops, our art places, all the things that make Canmore a wonderful place to live. But what we really need is for development in Canmore to be done in a manner that is socially, environmentally, and fiscally responsible. The TSMV and Smith Creek plans as they stand now do not satisfy any of these three. Thank you for allowing me to voice my opinion, and thank you for your ears.
Well, thanks very much for sharing your thoughts and being here this evening. I'm looking to see if there are any questions from members of council for you, but I see none. So you're off the hook. Thank you very much. And enjoy the rest of your evening.
And you all as well.
Yeah, pretty soon. At this time, I'll ask Ken Vierheller to join us.
Hello, lovely people of Canmore. Can you hear me, see me okay?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, council and mayor. First off, I want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my part tonight. I will make it quick. First, I want to say you all are rock stars for putting in all this time and energy, though. It's really amazing to watch. So my name is Ken Fearheller. I've lived in the Bow Valley for 10 years now. I'm a homeowner. Say I'm a wee bit of an introvert when it comes to public speaking, but quite honestly, this didn't seem like it was an option for me. I am opposed to both these proposals. Now, I know that so much of decision-making, especially in matters like this, lives and breathes in the land of facts, in details, in bylaws. And for consistency and fairness, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. But when it comes to values, connection, relationships, all the goodness that makes up being human, we have to make room for more than just facts and details and consider those intangibles when the decision in question is such a big change for our community. I really encourage council to see this as an opportunity to go within yourself, to ask yourself, does this meet our values? To ask ourselves, who will we become as a community if we make this decision either way? Does this decision meet our community's vision? And lastly, is this the legacy I want to pass along to the youth in our community? Now, I've sat here with everyone for the last 3 days watching all these amazing presentations, so thoughtful, so engaging. And it feels abundantly clear to me, we don't want this, which is so encouraging. I was inspired a couple weeks ago watching the Bow Valley Engage videos, and the former mayor, Ron Casey, was on. And what really inspired me was the fact when he was asked at the very end, does town council have the power to shut these proposals down? Because I wasn't sure. And he was very quick to answer, absolutely. And that was very, very reassuring. There's so much to risk here for so little gain from what I can see. In my mind, these proposals are not even close to good enough. They are far too big in scale, have far too many consequences for our wildlife. There's too much fire risk. There would be too much congestion. Financial burdens, be that taxes going up or undermining issues. So I beg you to not move our urban growth boundaries and rezone any land. Let's slow all of this down. Let's reject these plans and ask them to re-engage with something that is more relational, collaborative, and aligned with our community values. Honestly, I am tired of living in a world that celebrates success only in terms of money, GDP, capital, and growth. I want to live in a community that defines itself and its successes by our humanity, our inner well-being, how kind we are to one another. I want to define our success by our deep values for nature, how we protect our wildlife and stand as guardians for nature, and that we can create a better tomorrow leading through that lens. I want to live in a community that backs up the voices of the many who make up the heart and soul of this community who have already spoken. Council, you have an opportunity to lead and represent the majority who have spoken here over the last 3 days, and many more who will speak. You are in many ways the last line of defense. And for that, I ask you to seize the moment, to step up and be the heroes of this journey and of this community and vote down these proposals right now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts and joining us this evening. Are there questions from members of council? Seeing none. Again, thank you. I know it's often not easy to join in a meeting like this and speak, but you did very well, so thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good night.
This time I'll ask Tom Olmsted to join in.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, hello. I'll get going here. Hello from the Peaks and Grassy. Thank you, Mayor Borelman and council members for allowing me the opportunity to express myself on the two ASP's proposals of TSMV. Your endurance to sit through this process is quite impressive. My name is Tom Olmsted. My wife and I lived in the Peak of Grassy for 20 years now. We came for a vacation, and what we found here made us want to stay. For us, Canmore in many ways defines an ideal community. It's no surprise to us that so many people see it the same way we do. I feel so privileged to live in Canmore. I hope I never see the day when I no longer see a herd of elk along the power line, or I don't need to carry bear spray as I walk from our neighborhood in the peaks into town. I have read enough of the ASPs in question, and I've listened to the amazing presentations of this community, which I cannot equal. And I feel I can make an informed decision. Like so many, I've come to the conclusion that the two ASPs as proposed should be rejected. Developments on this scale over such an extended time frame could transfer a huge financial burden onto shoulders of future ratepayers and put Canmore's core economy at risk. These ASPs are asking us to roll the dice on too many issues without ongoing checks and balances. What Canmore should look like, about what Canmore is going to look like decades from now. The full ramifications of what will come from a decision cannot be fully understood by anybody today. Most of us put our trust in you so we can go about our daily business knowing you've got our backs and will not make any rash decisions. Please take all the time you have available for yourselves through this process, and you're doing a great job, so you can make the most informed decision. Any ASP that raises so many excellent questions, which only time can answer, that proposes to double the size of this community in such a fragile place, should be opposed if there's so much uncertainty. What little livable natural space still remains in our valley must be approached very, very carefully. The bulldozer approach of total destruction of many acres at once, like what was done in the clear-cut area of Stewart Creek development, is not acceptable. This should not be a debate. The investors knew what they bought. They factored it into their own cost and benefit analysis. They knew full well the sensitivity about the subject regarding overdeveloping this area, yet they asked for even more. They also understood the intention of the golf course, what that was. It was intended as a soft development that both humans and wildlife would share. I guess they thought there's no harm asking. With the reaction that they have seen, I expect they now wish they stayed with the original ASP from 2004 for the resort center. I'm originally from Kingsville, Ontario, the southernmost community in Canada, where my wife and I and my brother founded and built a significant food business. When we sold it and retired and moved to Canmore, we had more than 1,000 people on our payroll. If you've ever eaten at a restaurant or ever shopped for products labeled Green Giant, then we've probably fed you. Every time I return to Kingsville, I'm shocked to see how much of the farmland we used to grow corn on and peas, Canada's best farmland, that has now been converted into residential development and other buildings. If that trend continues, that story is not going to end very well. Canmore will never produce food like Kingsville. Here I view the wilderness land around Canmore as its resource and economic anchor. It's not about food, it's about tourism. Protecting it is the best business plan to ensure our economy's long-term stability. For this reason, I think it's reasonable to expect TSMV to break down the scale of this proposal into a step-by-step process of go and no-go decisions instead of asking us to take a huge leap of faith. Accepting these ASPs as written would deprive future generations and decision makers of their voices and the flexibility they'll need to manage it properly. For this reason alone, these ASPs should be rejected. I mentioned I came from Kingsville, Ontario, southernmost community in Canada, mainland Canada, sorry, Beeley Island. Kingsville is also known as the home of Jack Miner, who is renowned and celebrated for being the father of conservation in Canada because of his actions to save the Canada goose from its rapid decline in population over a century ago, and promoting the idea of conserving wetland and wildlife conservation. I know many today can't even imagine that the Canada goose was once so threatened. He did a good job. I think if Jack Miner was alive today, he would feel right at home in Canmore and relate to its people and this whole discussion. I hope to think that someday, a century from now, if Jack Miner was still alive, which he's not, he would still feel at home at a Canmore of the future, a place where wildlife such as bears and other living things from the top of the food chain to the bottom not only survive, but thrive. Until Jack Miner said to the federal government a century ago, the tourist dollar is as good as the wheat dollar, few understood the value of tourism and what it would someday bring. When the world discovered Canmore's wonderful wilderness setting in 1988, tourism exploded. Outdoor recreation was developed, and in time, many visitors like us became residents. Canmore's core economy rests on the dollars its visitors bring. They come for the same reasons most of us came here, to enjoy being in a place of exceptional beauty and natural beauty, away from the noise and crowds of people. Not even a sight of these amazing mountains will stop traffic a bear jam does. Bears are the most prized sighting of many, many visitors. I know bears still travel through our neck of the woods here in the Peaks, but I doubt anyone will ever need to carry bear spray in Stewart Creek again. Those who don't value bear habitat are putting Canmore's core economy at risk. I know Canmore's economy is more than about just sustaining bears, but if we do sustain bears, if we do sustain the bear population, it will be a telltale indicator which also says we have a rock solid, sustainable community, not just for ourselves, but for everything. When people look up sustainable development in the dictionary, may they find Canmore as an example in the future. So please don't ever let anything be built on the golf course.
Mr. Olmsted,
Okay, when?
Give you your 9-minute time check.
Perfect. So please don't allow anything to be built on the golf course which would prevent bears and other wildlife from traveling through it and through Canmore from end to end. COVID-19 has taught us how precious living space is. For both us humans and wildlife, every acre of nature counts. Bears and other wildlife give people the most important thing of all, hope for the future. With hope for the future, I hope you'll reject these ASPs. Thank you for your time, your dedication, and hard work. Really appreciate it. Good night.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that comment. Are there any questions from members of council? Councillor McCallum?
So not a question, but a statement, Mr. Olmsted. I have not met anybody out west that has ever lived in Kingsville because I lived in Kingsville as a small child. And I remember growing up about the story of Jack Miner, and I really appreciate you in all of these long days of public hearings sharing something that from your heart to mine. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Nice to see a friendly face from Kingsville.
Yeah, well, it doesn't take much to make Councillor McCallum happy.
Hey.
Okay, anyways, thank you very much, Mr. Olmsted. That was a heartfelt presentation to council. I appreciate how you've approached your presentation and shared your thoughts with us.
Well, thank you all. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. At this time, I'll ask Sarah Jones to join us, and not the Sarah Jones that's managing everything in the background. Different Sarah Jones.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mayor, councillors, Councillor McCallum. I'm not from Kingsville. I am from Ontario, though. So thank you all for taking the time. I have a few points, and a lot of them have been already covered in great detail. So I am going to review them, and then I will finish up with a little parable that I actually stole from Dr. David Suzuki. Right. And can you all see my screen?
Not quite yet.
Okay.
That's looking better.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. All right, so tonight I'll just quickly go over some of the reasons to oppose. Climate change has been mentioned, and it's a big one. On Tuesday, October 1st in 2019, Canmore declared a climate emergency. And this declaration is still in its infancy, and there is still so much work to do, really, to reduce the climate footprint that we already have without going into further developments. As has been spoken about very eloquently already this evening, it will reduce or inactivate wildlife corridors and also reduce those buffer zones. So those areas that are needed between that human inhabitant areas and wildlife areas. And not just in Alberta, but throughout Canada, and I'm sure other countries as well. We have studies that show that there's increased amount of waste in the stomachs of autopsied wildlife. We've also this evening heard a little bit more about the increased urban sprawl with undermining. And then also something that's really important, the increased need for development and maintenance of critical infrastructure. So Canada defines the 10 critical infrastructure sectors: energy and utilities, finance, food, transportation, to get everyone to and from these areas, government, information and communication technology, healthcare services, water, not just the water that comes from our faucets and through our showers, but also that sewer as well, the waste runoff, safety, so police, fire, paramedics, as well as manufacturing. So a few more reasons we've heard about the sinkholes, and these aren't theories, these are in actuality. The potential doubling in size of the population, and that's where I'll share a little story from Dr. David Suzuki. I'd like to also just reiterate the fact that affordable housing doesn't necessarily mean more. So that urban sprawl, we don't necessarily need to add on to what we already have and create housing with additional land space. We need to have an infinite mindset in order to continue to live in a sustainable space. So we shouldn't be making decisions that limit the future of Canmore. So without further ado, sustainable exponential growth. So we start off with a test tube with one bacteria filled with nutrients enough to sustain life for the bacteria. And this bacteria divide once every minute. And at minute 60, the test tube is full. So there are 2 bacteria at 2 minutes, 4 bacteria at 3 minutes, 8 bacteria at 4 minutes. So we'll fast forward up to minute 57. And the test tube is only 12.5% full. And yet there is a clear population problem here. It doesn't look like it. In this little parable that Dr. Suzuki shared, he's suggested that one bacteria tells all the other bacteria, we need to stop multiplying because we have a population problem. to which all the other bacteria say, this test tube is 80% filled with nutrients and empty for all of us, you're crazy. At minute 58, the test tube is 25% full. At minute 59, it's 50% full. And at minute 60, it's 100% full. So what's interesting here is that at minute 61, in order for the bacteria to continue to live and reproduce at the rate that they have been, 2 test tubes are required. And at minute 62, 4 test tubes are now required. Humans don't have 3 additional planets available to them. And in a more smaller scale, Canmore is a finite space. And there is no such thing as sustainable exponential growth. So please consider this and take this into your judgments in terms of whether you approve or oppose the development here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jones. I am always been a fan of Dr. Suzuki, so appreciate you using his work. Are there questions from members of council for Ms. Jones? Seeing none, thank you so much for joining us this evening and sharing your perspective in your way.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
This time I'll ask Patricia McConkry to join us. McConkry.
Patricia, you're muted. We can't hear.
Sorry, now I'm not. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you very much for allowing everyone to speak and have their moment. I am opposed to the project, and I wanted just to briefly ask a couple questions, if I may. Do we know how many Canmorians are opposed versus accepting of this project? Do we know what the balance is? Have we taken any kind of poll, or is there any kind of information like that?
No.
Okay, well, I would like to propose that that be undertaken, because I think I live in the community. I live in South Canmore, and I would like to know if we are a democracy, which we are, that if it's a majority of people that don't wish to proceed with this project, if that would really stand true, that that's how democracy works, that if most people don't wish this to go through, is that how it works, or is there something else that we need to do as people who are opposed to the project?
You're doing what you should be doing, sharing your perspective with the elected council, and we were elected to make decisions.
Okay, so, well, I will endeavor to get names on a list to see how many people actually would sign a petition to show the council what you're looking at. If this truly is a majority of people that don't want it, then perhaps that would have weight with the council. So that's all I wanted to say, is just to find out if there was information on that, and if not, I believe that we should get some together. I don't know if the council has other information like that can be shared. I'd certainly appreciate it, but thank you very much for your time, and I hope you will hear from me again. Oh, a question? Sure.
I'll ask Councillor Sanford to bring her question forward.
Thank you.
Mayor Barman, I think we could clarify for Patricia
Yes.
that information will be available at the end of the public hearing because it will be compiled and sent out to the public.
Okay, great.
So,
appreciate that.
Which information are you talking about, Councillor
just a tally
Sanford?
of the number of submissions, the written submissions, the public hearing submissions, the number of opposed and the number of in favor and the number in neutral.
Okay.
Correct?
Could I clarify? The number of submissions is not necessarily, so the number of submissions opposed is not necessarily the number of opposed people in the community, right? That's just the people that have voiced their concern. I'm asking that we should have a plebiscite or a big open discussion where we include a much larger population of the community to find out what they think, not just the people who are vocalizing their opposition.
Councillor Comfort, did you have a question or a comment?
I was just going to say more or less what Councillor Sanford said. All of the data will be out after the hearing is over, and you can see how many people were for and against. That's all I have to say at this point.
That the information, as you've noted, will be shared. That will only reflect anybody who's submitted
That's right.
written or verbal comments to council, and of course that's a long ways from being everybody.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that point that needs to be made is that it's up to the council to make the decision, unless there's there are other legislative means to get to a decision, but it is the purview of the elected council to make that decision. That's our job, I think.
Right. And it's your job to represent the majority of the people's wishes. Is that correct?
No, not necessarily, but that's a discussion for another forum, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Happy to talk to you if you want to phone me.
Okay.
Because sometimes, you know, sometimes what really is what I see as our mandate is to make the best decision for all of the people, not just a fragment or a particular, I'm tired, sorry, a particular vocal group.
Regardless, if Ms. McConkey, do you have any specific input or thoughts to share in regards to the ASPs that are proposed?
Well, they've all been shared. All the points that I had have already been gone over and over. So I'm sorry, I don't think it's worth your time just for me to reiterate that I'm concerned about the wildlife population and the sinkholes and the doubling of population. All of those points were things that I was going to talk about. But just to reiterate on the councillor's point that she thinks a decision must be made not just on a small sect of people. What I'm saying is that I think it's important to get a larger read on the population, not just the vocal opposition or the vocal that are going for it. I think you need to get a larger read on the population of Canmore.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's done through a petition or something, but I think it's important.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that perspective, Ms. McConkey.
Thank you so much for your time. And I really hope that before you make a decision that a lot of these factors are taken into control. And I know you guys have had a long night, so I hope you have a good meeting, and hopefully it will come to an end soon.
Thank you. Next, I'll ask Jacob Herrero to join us. Well, just while we're waiting for Mr. Herrero, I should note that I've been advised that everybody that will be speaking until 9 o'clock, all of the people that will be able to perhaps hear from have been admitted into the room. So if you haven't been admitted in at this point, the expectation is that we won't have time to hear from those speakers, and perhaps you could contact the municipal clerk's office and hopefully reschedule. So we will try to hear from all of the people that are yet in the room to speak. And Mr. Herrero, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my video was shut off by the town clerk earlier because I accidentally bombed the session, and now she's got to turn me back on.
Okay.
There we go. Now there's a button. Hooray! I'm alive. Okay.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jacob Herrero, and with my hand up, I hereby solemnly swear that I have read both ASPs in question, as well as previous ASPs, and that I am a 30-year member of Three Sisters Anonymous, less active than before due to the demands of my business, but nevertheless still concerned. Joking aside, I'm going to wear a few hats, including this one, for my presentation. First hat, that of a longtime resident. So I remember when there were no paved streets in Canmore, so we got to go well back over 50 years for that. Second hat is that of an environmental scientist. In the 1990s, I helped assess the design and functionality of the Three Sisters wildlife corridors using some government-endorsed wildlife corridor design standards. Third hat I wear, I'm a business owner, have been from 2001, and I run a small Canmore technology company that keeps myself and my employees very busy. And the last and most important hat I wear, I feel, is the same hat that the great majority of other presenters so far wear, and that's a resident deeply concerned about our community. First, some thank yous. Thank you, council, administration, and Three Sisters for bringing the two area structure plans forward at the same time. This is the first time since 2013 that we've really had a chance to look at the complete picture of what is proposed. So that was a very important step, and thank you for doing that. Also, I'd like to thank the Stoney and Nakota delegation who presented on Tuesday and powerfully opposed both ASPs and reminded us that we live on Treaty 7 lands and that the town, and particularly Three Sisters, both have work to do before any further approvals are given. And as Elder Roland Mudd said, once it's gone, it's gone. There's no second chance. Though I have many concerns, I will focus mainly on Three Sisters project magnitude. And if I still have some time, which is somewhat doubtful, I'll loop back into wildlife corridors and maybe a bit on the NRCB. So one of the primary problems I see with the two area structure plans relates to their enormous magnitude. That's no news for you. You've been hearing that over and over. But even myself, as a 30-year veteran of this, I did not fully realize the magnitude of what they proposed until after days of slogging through large documents like our 567 page land use bylaw and a multitude of ASPs. So what I'd like to do now is share my screen. So I click the little green button and then I click share. And what do you see out there? Do you see anything?
It doesn't look like what you want to share. It says a leader in the 2020 Gartner Magic Quadrant in Meeting Solutions.
Okay, let me try once more. Yeah, there's been a lot of screen sharing issues I've noticed, and I rehearsed this before, and oh, that's really too bad because I have some very important graphics.
Jacob, if I could try to help. So if you click on the green screen share icon and then click the application you're trying to share, not the screen itself, but if it's a document, click the document. You should have it open on your computer.
Okay.
Give that a try.
Anything there?
Not yet, no.
Okay. Well, this isn't going to be the same at all. I put a lot of work into this, so I'm definitely a bit frustrated.
Will you be able to share that as a PowerPoint with us? Like send it to us?
Okay, here we go. Let's just do it verbally. So I think lost in the dense and confusing details regarding this Three Sisters project is, yeah, the scale and magnitude as compared to their earlier proposals. And this is what I took a look at when I, did my deep dive. And their earlier proposals, spanning up into 2013, called for adding the equivalent of one BAMF in terms of residential units. So that's 2,729. And the current Three Sisters proposals, when bonusing is included, would be well over 2 BAMFs. And when we combine their existing Stewart Creek residential units, 3 BAMFs. That's a massive amount of development for an ecologically sensitive area with extensive undermining. In 2013, there were about 2,500 unbuilt residential units remaining. And these numbers were derived from the allowed maximum units in section 14.924 of bylaw DC 198, which governs development on Three Sisters lands. So fast forward to now, and Three Sisters proposed residential units have increased from about 2,500 to between 4,000 and 7,150. So that's 57 to 180% increase over 2013. Now, both of those numbers are well over the maximum 3,447 units specified in the bylaw. And I'm really sorry about all of the numbers, but I do feel they are important. The 7,150 total, now I've combined Smith Creek and Three Sisters Village in that number, and these are their numbers, not mine. That's inclusive of an unspecified number of bonused market-based affordable housing units, and also bonused units for energy efficiency and climate change related improvements. Regarding affordable housing, I think we need to keep in mind that in 2013, the owners, TSMV owners, proposed 5% perpetually affordable housing. And that's true affordable housing. That's not market-based. That was genuine, perpetually PAH standard affordable housing. So there's a big difference there. And regarding energy efficiency, much of the bonusing would try to achieve the 20 to 90% better than Alberta's existing building code. But even at 90%, we're not even up to British Columbia's existing building code for energy efficiency. So not great gains. The equivalent of one BAMF at Three Sisters, is really hard enough to imagine, but 2 to 3 is unfathomable, and really for whose benefit. The impacts on our environment, such as wildlife corridors, parks, carbon footprint, our infrastructure in terms of increased road and bridge congestion. We don't have a 4-lane bridge like Banff does over the Bow River. We have a 2-lane bridge. And with the equivalent of 3 Banffs on both sides of the Bow River, that's a pretty narrow squeeze. Our tax rates, due to anemic commercial tax base, and also, impacts on our community values, our quality of life. I think it would be, both profound and permanent. Wildlife corridors. I think I'm getting on in terms of time here. I'm going to zero in on one.
Mr. Herrero, excuse me, just wanted to let you know you are at 9 minutes, and I did pause for the technical challenges.
Okay, thank you very much. Given the scale of the TSMV project and its location on ecologically sensitive lands important to wildlife, I think we must do everything to reduce risk of failure and enhance the chance of success. And also another topic I want to touch on, no time, many unfulfilled NRCP commitments, and the Stoney Nakoda Nations delegation touched on that. So in summary, proposal's too big, too many residential units, too many risks, ecological, social, economic, safety risks, and also too many unfulfilled NRCP commitments. And there appears to be very little community support that I can see. We know Three Sisters can do better. They've done better in the past in terms of scale and magnitude. 2009 was 1,700 units. Now we're seeing 4 times that amount. That's mind-blowing to me. The developer might find better support at some of their previous proposals. Finally, I wish council well on making what could be the most important decision any council ever makes. As you know, stakes are extremely high. And last but not least, thank you for the opportunity to present, even if I couldn't do it visually.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. And if you feel there's value, you could send your PowerPoint as part of your written submission, or attach it in some way. But thank you for taking the time to be prepared and to present your perspective this evening, Jacob.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I had misunderstood the last suggestion from Municipal Clerk's Department. I had thought everybody that was in the room now would get a chance to speak, but I was wrong. I think we might hear from 3 more if we're fortunate this evening. And the next 3 in the list is Tara Koenig, Cindy Kelly, and Donna Hayes. So anybody else that is in the room waiting to speak, I think I hope you'll be able to reschedule for one of the other days of our public hearings. With that, I will ask Tara Koenig to speak.
Hello, everyone. Thank you
Hello.
for taking the time this evening. So I just would like to state that I oppose. And it's fair to say that I have a really good understanding of the needs of the young adult population in our community. However, this evening I am speaking on behalf of myself and not necessarily representing an organization right now. My 3 points that I would like to talk about are the climate emergency, wildlife and our natural environment, and the effect of this development on our community. So first one, in early 2020, we had an event called Beers with Borman, and we talked about the state of climate emergency that the town had just declared. In that presentation, or in that event, I should say, we learned that most of our carbon emissions come from buildings in our community. And it just doesn't make sense to me that a development of this size would be aligned with the declaration of a climate emergency. The footprint of this project does not make sense to me. The impact on our natural resources does not make sense to me. My second point about wildlife and our natural environment. I thought it was tacky in the ASP to have the land acknowledgement. We learned from our Indigenous community that they were not properly consulted and they are not consenting to this project. I live close to where the development is going to, well, may take place. And there's so much evidence of the wildlife in that area. I enjoy walking around and seeing the wild berry and the grasses growing. We notice prints and scat in the area, as well as large nests in the grass where elk spend the night with their young. It'd be such a shame to have all of that destroyed. I think of the book by Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass, which I think is not just a well-written book, but an important resource that we should refer to. She says, ask permission before taking and abide by the answer. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever. To love a place is not enough. We must find ways to heal it. With all of that in mind, knowing the effects that this development may have on the wildlife and natural environment, I oppose. I hear often about Canmore being a vibrant community, especially talked about within the municipality. However, it's my personal perspective that the only ones who are well off and privileged are currently living a vibrant life. To me, when I walk around spaces where there are new condo developments, million-dollar duplexes, and the constant turnover, I don't see a vibrant community. What I see is privilege. I see an exclusive resort, and I see the needs of tourists coming before community members' quality of life. I've noticed in the almost 8 years of living here, the change within our community. As I said before, to me, sometimes it feels like I'm living in a resort rather than a small community. I find it lucky to find a parking spot when I'm going to the grocery store. Sometimes I have to do multiple laps. Because of recent changes within provincial governments, 2 of my doctors have left the community, and now it's taking me weeks to get in to see my doctor. While teaching yoga, I noticed our rec facility was over full even before the restrictions cut the capacity down. Do we really have the infrastructure in place to support thousands of more residents? In summer of last year, there was an event called Coffee with Council. One item that was brought up was the Canmore Community Housing Resource. Those who attended Coffee with Council, we all stated that no one was using this Canmore Community Housing Resource. Everyone was able to find more affordable and, most importantly, nicer, more accommodating housing than using the Canmore Community Housing. It's not that we weren't aware of it, we just felt that it wasn't meeting our needs. I can honestly say that right now, Canmore Community Housing is not meeting my needs. I have no confidence that just this project as it is proposed would change that with regards to affordable housing for our residents either. One more argument I have is that the development would create jobs. I've seen many construction sites outsource their labors, supplementing their needs with a few locals here and there, but for the most part, bringing in large quantities of labor from other parts of the province, and even we've seen coming in from Ontario or BC. So to summarize, I do not consent to this development. I do not agree with the development on either ASP as it is proposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members of council for Ms. Koenig? Seeing none, thank you for taking the time and putting your thoughts together to address council this evening on these issues.
Thank you.
And at this time, I will ask Cindy Kelly to join us.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello from Cougar Creek to everybody. And thank you for sticking it out till the very last two speakers. So you're almost there, ready for your scotch and glass of wine. It's been a marathon public hearing and it's really captured the hearts and minds of so many residents, unlike at any other time, thanks to COVID, a little benefit of COVID. My name is Cindy Kelly, and I have lived and worked in Canmore for 33 years and been in the Bow Valley for 37. I'm a kinesiologist and interpretive guide, leading hikes in our amazing national parks and provincial parks, and I'm also a teacher of yoga. I'm also the mother of now 2 grown children who are both born and raised here. My involvement in the community of Canmore began in the early 90s with attending NRCB hearings in the Wind Valley, about the Wind Valley, not in the Wind Valley. And I also got involved in promoting bear-proof bins and fostering and promoting organics recycling. So those are my involvements, and I'm still strongly interested in how Canmore is doing. I will say right off the bat, and we'll weigh in with my opposition to the 2 ASP proposals as they have been presented to Canmore residents and Town Council. That is to say, in its present form, I am opposed after having spent time listening and reading, and I ask you to reject it in its present form. Secondly, I strongly reiterate the eloquent requests by many residents, for example, Cheryl Hushnowski, to use this rare opportunity to press pause and give the town, its residents, and the developer time through intentional and respectful visioning and discussions to find common ground. Not always easy to do. And it has occurred to me while listening that the large elephant, meant in the best of ways, in the room during these public hearings is the Three Sisters Mountain Village representatives. And my hope is that these representatives are listening in with great interest as well. Given what I've just said about hitting pause, I wonder, would the developer come to the table along with the town and its residents in setting a future vision for the town of Canmore for the next, and I'll throw it out there, up to 50 years. It sounds like there's a lot of willingness to do this hard work. I see 3 or maybe 2 or 3 possible doors we can go through for the future of Canmore. And just in like the game show, Let's Make a Deal, I'll use the door number 1, door number 2, and door number 3 analogies. So if we choose door number 1, we would accept the fate as it is now with the steady drip, drip, drip of second home development to find that Canmore in 50 years has built out to fill the entire footprint of the valley with an empty shell of a town and no substantial, engaged, or vibrant population of primary homeowners to run and service it. That's thinking quite a ways out. So choosing to open this door, we will very likely continue to stumble towards the gates of wealth, as Nelson Rubin coined it last month in his presentation, where only the wealthy will be lucky enough to be full-time, part-time, weekend, or rarely visiting Canmore homeowners. Door number 2, by contrast, will we simply open and then close door number 2 behind us and say just, let's say no to more development? I believe that it is obvious that the choice of this door is not entirely realistic nor pragmatic, even if we would like it to be so. So behind door number 3, and this would be my choice and solution to the pickle we are in. I think it is a pickle. This would be the hard choice to walk the middle path and strike an acceptable balance. Choosing to go through this door inevitably requires hard work, listening to each other, and taking and giving on all sides. Keeping at the forefront climate change, wildlife considerations, and a good quality of life for all residents, young and old, and be they wild and furry or human bare-skinned types. I agree that Canmore, its residents and developers need a strong spur to step up, to reimagine itself and create a new, overarching and long-lasting vision that becomes part of the town's DNA. Its raison d'être, as described by people like Ruben Nelson and others who have spoken throughout this engagement and presentations. The community of Canmore has this unique opportunity to press pause on this development, roll up its sleeves, buff up its sometimes wavering, but mostly effortful and courageous reputation as a leader in climate action and environmental stewardship, while reinforcing its resilience, robustness, and its strong social fabric. Bottom line, we all know that Three Sisters Mountain Village and its land development potential has been a pressure point and factor for over 3 decades, and it will not suddenly disappear or go away, as much as we might like it to. We cannot put our heads in the sand. The 5 things that I have kind of highlighted as my opposition is, and they have been so eloquently described already, so I won't go into them, but the inadequacy of the wildlife corridors. My concerns are over considerable traffic congestion on highways and interior roads of the town, the risk and liability of the town of Canmore and residents to undermining issues, the increase in taxes that Rod DeLube, with his expertise, has so well calculated and described as doubling over, I believe he said, the next 10 years. Will seniors and young people be able to afford that? I also inserted wild smarting, responsibility and liability will increase greatly. Inconsistencies between the town of Canmore Municipal Development Plan and the 2 proposed ASPs, as Ron Casey so eminently described as well, are concerns for me. And I also did a little research. I looked at Aspen, Colorado, which we have often been compared to as the Aspen of the North. And there are jaw-dropping bits of information that I read on Wikipedia that the average single-family home in Aspen, which is a similar community to Canmore, but in the US, the average single-family home sold for $11 million. 9 sold for above 25 million in 2020. It has some of the most expensive rentals in the US. People have to live outside of the town in order to service it. So locals don't live in Aspen anymore. So I really hope that we kind of avoid that path and choose door number 3. So this leads to my last but not least heading of livability, quality of life, and affordability. And so important, as the previous speaker, Tara, just mentioned. So to complete my remarks, I have an important quote for you.
Ellie, just your 9-minute time check.
Thank you very much. To complete my remarks, this is an important quote from the famous or now infamous Dr. Seuss. I am the Lorax, I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees have no tongues. I hope that our voices over the past few days have also spoken for those who have not had a voice yet in these discussions, voices for wildlife, trees, and settler and Indigenous voices. Thank you for your attention and the long days you have spent listening, and for all of your hard work and consideration.
Well, thank you for your long hours spent listening as well and preparing for your presentation to council. And appreciate all the thinking, the thought that's gone into your presentation.
Thank you.
I'm looking to see if there's any questions, but I see none. So thank you very much.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Cindy. And I'll ask for Donna Hayes to join us. And Donna will be the last speaker this evening.
Hi, can you hear
No.
me?
Yep.
Okay, I can't believe I made the last spot. First off, I'd like to sincerely thank you for taking the time to listen to all the concerned citizens of the Valley. My name is Donna Hayes, and I'm a current resident and homeowner in Canmore and have been since 1987. And I, like many others, am very nervous about speaking, but I think that speaks to the importance of this decision to all of us in the Valley, that we are prepared to go out of our comfort zone to speak on this. I've been, like so many others, I've been so impressed with all the presentations thus far. And though I have tried to do my due diligence by looking at the ASPs and watching both TSMV and Bow Valley Engage webcasts, I'm not an expert. And as such, I really just want to be speaking today from my heart. I was actually quite shocked at the sheer size and scope of these ASPs. And as much as TSMV would have us think otherwise, they seem to have totally disregarded the values and vision of this community. We have been fighting for this valley for years, always over the same things, primarily wildlife corridors and undermining. And previous proposals have been rejected as recently, I believe, as 2017, because, among other things, they did not meet wildlife corridor standards. Yet Three Sisters Mountain Village comes back with a proposal that narrows the corridor even further and includes developing lands at Smith Creek, a critical point of the corridor that has been zoned specifically to protect us. I know the recent acceptance by AEP makes it a more difficult thing to reject, but the current provincial government has clearly demonstrated to me that they strongly value the economy, seemingly at the expense of the environment. And we, the citizens of this valley, have clearly demonstrated over and over that we value the environment. So we must stand up. To be given the go-ahead to develop in this very special and important valley, I believe is a privilege. And along with this privilege comes a huge responsibility to work with experts, to work with the town and the citizens of this valley to get it right. And I was extremely disheartened to see TSMV stating in the local paper that they have no intention of budging on the wildlife corridor. And sadly, they're still not listening, and it seems like they're not going to listen. And to me, that's a bit of a red flag. I don't know how easy they are going to be to work with. I'm not anti-development per se, but I think both these ASPs are way off the mark. My preference would be to reject these ASPs outright and send TSMV back to the drawing board. Perhaps we too could take the time, as others have suggested, to work towards a common vision for our future. Working together would hopefully lessen the polarization that I can already feel is building. And this would also help TSMV to come back to us with an ASP that is more acceptable. If this is not possible, I would request that council use all zoning policies and bylaws to ensure enough room for both wildlife and humans to coexist. But should you find the courage to reject these ASPs, I think by the last few days, you know the community has your back. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with council this evening. Are there Any questions for Ms. Hayes from members of council? Seeing none, once again, I really do appreciate you taking the time and hanging in till almost 9 o'clock to speak.
As you guys do. Thank you.
Yeah, and I got 5 minutes. Yeah, I think I'll recess the public hearing now because I can barely listen anymore. I'm pretty burned out, and I guess probably the rest of council is as well. So I'll call a recess in the public hearing now until 9 o'clock next Monday morning. And thank you all for hanging into the end this evening. See you Monday morning.